Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into a tale of misfired passion and beastly surprises. Just the kind of story you probably won't survive this without a cozy blanket and maybe a cheeky snack by your side. Picture a moonlit village square lantern swaying like sleepy fireflies, and Cupid himself perched on a rooftop arrow, knocked and ready to spark romance, or so he thinks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, hey, don't be shy, post your location and local time down below so we can see who's drifting off alongside us tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a narrow cobblestone lane, each step echoing in the hush of midnight as a single golden arrow, fletched with feathers softer than a kitten's whiskers, flies errantly past a crooked rooftop. That arrow isn't meant for our hero, nor for his beloved. It's meant to spark a grand love story, the likes of which sung minstrels still celebrate. Yet here we are witnesses to Cupid's oops moment, because even divine beings have off nights like that. Time he accidentally gave a toad a crush on a scarecrow. Speaking of toads, did you know that medieval peasants sometimes believed that smearing crocodile dung sunscreen would ward off evil spirits? Historians still argue whether that really kept sunburn at bay or just caused a rather pungent rash, but it's definitely one of those quirky tidbits you brag about at awkward dinner parties. Back to our love fiasco. Once in ancient Rome, marriages were arranged with the solemn signing of a parchment by stern-faced parents and that one uncle who always smelled faintly of figs. And let's be honest, nobody thought to send Cupid an email about the schedule. In those days, a single misaligned scroll or misplaced seal could unite you with a stranger in tunic and sandals, no Tinder swipe required. And just like that, Cupid's stray shot careens through an open window, shattering a lantern and igniting a tiny spark that flickers across the bride's powdered cheek. The townspeople snug in their woolen blankets awake to a distant crash and murmur that true love, or something approximating it, is in the air. You probably won't survive this tale without at least one yawn, so stretch those eyelids now. The arrow, shimmering with a slightly off-kilter glow, embeds itself in the oaken door of the village hall. A hush falls, broken only by the gentle rustle of linen and someone clearing their throat, probably that same soothsayer who still insists frogs crooning under a full moon can predict market prices. Even today, scholars squabble over whether such fringe rituals ever held sway or were simply the fevered dreams of overstressed villagers. Historians still argue whether predicting weather by frog song ever had any merit, or if it was just an excuse to throw midnight marshmallow roasts, though both ideas sound equally delightful. With that minor explosion of magical mischief, the entire community is jolted awake. You trudge past shuttered windows and half-asleep cats perched on windowsills, their tails flicking in annoyance. Someone spills a pail of water and it ripples across the square, as if murmuring, "What fresh nonsense is this?" A stray dog barks once two barks, if it's feeling particularly judgmental, before scuttling off into the shadows. Meanwhile, a lantern keeper trips over his own feet, sending sparks dancing into the air like fireflies doing an indecisive tango. Now lean in, because here's where the mainstream fact slides in. During medieval times, town criers would announce important news with a boom of a bell, often wearing a bellman's hat that looks suspiciously like a teapot. Fashion statements have never been easy to explain. And in our story, the town bell clangs 3 times, echoing against the timber-framed walls and prodding half-dreaming villagers to peer out into the night. A collective murmur rises. Did Cupid just go haywire? Of course, nobody says Cupid out loud. Rumors travel through whispers and wild gesticulations because subtlety never survived past sundown. Meanwhile, a young bride-to-be, draped in silk so pale it rivals dawn's first blush, hovers at her window slippers dangling from one foot. She rubs her eyes, wondering if she's hallucinating sparks of gold drifting across her courtyard. You can almost feel her heartbeat in the hush, like a drumbeat, trying not to embarrass itself in front of an audience. Historians still argue whether ancient bridal gowns started out white as a symbol of purity, or merely because bleach was a surprisingly popular cleaning agent back then. Either way, that silken dress now sports a singed hem from one of the stray sparks, hardly a scandalous defilement, but enough to make her gasp and tumble back from the window. You probably won't survive this section without another gentle yawn, so feel free to stretch those arms again. It's a good time to remember that embarrassing myth about watery cheese leading to spontaneous dancing goats. Ah, yes, goat lore. Another thing scholars debate, though archaeological finds of tiny hoof prints near dairy churns do suggest something interesting. But let's not get sidetracked by livestock musicals. Instead, recall that callback from our previous bedtime journey, the crocodile dung sunscreen fiasco. Well, tonight's misfire won't require any dubious ointments, but it sure sets the stage for a wedding no one planned. As the clock's shadows lengthen, you stand in the cool night air, listening to the muffled chatter of villagers trading theories. Some swear they glimpsed a silhouette fur claws and all emerging from behind the bell tower. Others whisper that the arrow was meant for a noble's heart, not a humble baker's daughter. A stray tumbleweed would be quieter than these debates if it weren't for the occasional booming snore from old Marigold's chimney, where she's fast asleep, regardless of cosmic mishaps. And there you have it. The stage is set, the players primed, and Cupid's misfired arrow has lit a fuse of enchantment and anxiety. Sleepy as you are, you trudge on, ready to witness how a beastly bridegroom comes crashing into this sleepy hamlet, and possibly into a heart or two along the way. You slip from the village hall's shadow into a ring of flickering lantern light, where clusters of villagers huddle like wary sparrows. They lean in, speaking in hushed tones that flutter through the night air, rumors of curling smoke sparks dancing over rooftops, and a single golden arrow that never should have been loose. You trudge closer, and the murmur grows. Did you see the glow? Someone whispers, voice trembling like a quill in an open breeze. They say it wasn't a star, but magic. Another replies, brow furrowed under a woolen hood. Hands gesture wildly as each person offers their own version of events. One claims the arrow crackled with blue flame. Another insists it hummed like a tiny bell. A stout baker flower, still dusting his sleeves, despite the hour, swears he felt a shiver run down his spine as the arrow passed overhead. You probably won't survive this section without pausing for a deep breath, so inhale that crisp night air now. Somewhere behind you, a stray cat arches its back and disappears into an alleyway, as if chasing gossip of its own. A mainstream historical fact floats into the conversation. In medieval villages, word of ill omens often spread faster than the plague town criers would broadcast news at dawn. But before that, whispers in the marketplace carried tales of eclipse or comet sightings that could make an entire region quake in fear. You catch a snippet. In 1347, rumors of black rats heralded the Black Death before any official notice arrived, a reminder that fear can outrun authority. In the circle, an elderly woman rocks on her heels, recounting how her grandmother once believed that moonlit sheep could turn into wolves under a misaligned star. She tilts her head conspiratorially. Historians still argue whether such superstition ever caused real harm or just made shepherds sleep with one eye open. That phrase hangs heavy as dew on a spider's web because scholars indeed debate if tales of lycanthropy sprang from misunderstood diseases or deliberate folklore designed to control nightly wanderings. You note a callback to our crocodile dung sunscreen anecdote. Someone laughs. Well, if sunscreen could ward off evil spirits, maybe we ought to smear this arrow with it, 'fore we fetch it. The group chuckles, imagining buckets of rancid ointment smeared across the town square. Even in the midst of unease, humor finds a foothold, sleepy humor that feels like a defiant wink at fate. Another fringe tidbit surfaces. A local shepherd swears that once in a distant county, a misfired arrow transformed a field of wheat into dancing sprites for 3 nights straight. Crazy as a bag of barn owls, he concludes, tossing his cap into the air as if to demonstrate the whimsy. You trudge through that story, filing it under entertaining hearsay, but noting that medieval chronicles sometimes recorded similar nonsense, often to entertain the literate elite, of course. A younger woman with lantern in hand presses forward, eyes bright. I heard the soothsayer muttering something about unbinding spells, something about chanting under the old oak. She points a slender finger skyward. The clouds overhead drift like giant ghostly sails. You can almost taste the anticipation on your tongue, tangy as unripe berries. Hesitantly, someone wonders if the oak refers to the one by the brook where weddings once took place. And just like that, you're caught in a swirl of conjecture weddings at oak groves, dancing wheat sprites, croaking frogs, predicting weather lantern sparks, igniting bridal gowns, and now an oak tree magic. The tapestry of rumor wraps itself around your senses, threads pulling you closer into the heart of this unfolding drama. Amid the chatter, a man rattles off a mainstream note. In 12th century England, parish meetings held at dawn decided everything from crop rotations to marriage bans. So if it happened at night, it was either witchcraft or a very committed drunk. The villagers chuckle, but underlying that laughter is unease. You probably won't survive this tale without at least one more yawn, so feel free to stretch those jaws now. Oddly enough, someone remarks how modern scholars still debate whether those parish meetings ever truly reflected popular will or were stage-managed by barons and bishops. Another historians still argue whether moment to keep your eyelids from drooping too fast. Each time you feel that gentle nudge reminding you we're weaving fact fringe and scholarly open questions, so you stay awake and curious. A stray breeze rattles the lanterns overhead, setting their flames to dance like impatient spirits. Nearby, a trio of children presses their faces against a low window, eyes wide with fascination. One of them whispers, "My ma says it was the beast of the broken spire came to court our baker's daughter." At mention of a broken spire, an old mason nods, remembering the time a lightning bolt split the church tower centuries ago. He mutters under his breath, "In 1165, lightning fractured half the spire and no one dared rebuild it. For decades, said it displeased the saints." That reference, land lightning and saints' displeasure, slips in as a mainstream historical fact, although the exact year may vary depending on who you ask. Historians still argue whether that break was blamed on divine wrath or mere thunderstorms inexplicably branded as holy omens. The villagers lean in hungry for more context, as if each tidbit were a crumb of reassurance. Meanwhile, an emboldened blacksmith hammer, faintly echoing from his workshop, declares, "I'll bet any coin that arrow belonged to a jester, playing tricks on Cupid laughter, bubbles up like warm cider, but a hush falls when the soothsayer, draped in mismatched silks, slithers forward through the knot of bodies. She raises a gnarled hand, fingernails painted a chipped emerald. Enough," she croaks, voice a low chant that reverberates beneath the lantern glow. Magic of this sort is older than our cobblestones. To meddle with hearts invites chaos. She pauses, letting the silence thicken. You've heard the scholars who still argue whether true enchantment ever existed outside dusty grimoires. I say it thrums here. Her eyes flick to a dark alley, and it sings, if you dare to listen. You trudge closer, curiosity prodding you like a playful ghost. The soothsayer adds a fringe hint. I once saw a shroud of will-o'-the-wisps swirl at a lunar eclipse, guiding lost souls to dancing altars in the forest. A few shake their heads, calling her stories bonkers, but a few others nod, remembering strange lights they couldn't explain last winter. Someone pipes up, if frogs can predict weather, maybe will-o'-wisps can guide hearts. The soothsayer chuckles, tossing back a lock of silver hair, or perhaps they lure you into bogs. Such is the duality of arcane lore. You wrinkle your nose at the idea and marvel at how even in jest people cling to strange narratives when ordinary explanations fail to comfort. As the gossip mill churns, you feel the weight of every skeptical eyebrow and hopeful glance. Whispers swirl around you like autumn leaves in a gentle gust. You catch a glimpse of the bride's silhouette at her window, still framed by that singed curtain, watching the spectacle below. Does her heart race because she fears madness, or because she senses destinies colliding in this very moment? A stray dog trots past again, this time pausing to sniff at the soothsayer's trailing cloak, as if assessing whether magic smells like mothballs or lavender. The children giggle, someone jostles the dog, and the lanterns sway more fiercely, casting long, quivering shadows that look almost alive. Despite the laughter, you can taste the tension, a mix of delight, dread, and restless wonder. It's the perfect recipe for a night that refuses to settle into sleep. You probably won't survive these mysterious whispers without another stretch and yawn, so indulge yourself one last time before we trudge deeper into this tale. Under that wavering lamplight, the village breathes as one organism, curious, cautious buzzing with half-formed theories. Some wonder if a midnight bell tolled unbidden heralding doom. Others swear it signaled hope. Historians still argue whether church bells ever rang on their own, or if lonely bellmen paid an ale-turned rogue. Fringe lore contends that bells could ring themselves to ward off dragons, though no one's actually spotted a dragon since Grandpa's boot scare in '72. And there, in the heart of the whispering circle, you settle a silent observer heart, thumping in time with every rumor. The scene is set for more revelations, beast-stirring brides trembling, and Cupid's arrow still pulsing with mischief. Now, brace yourself for Dawn's proclamation, because if what they say is true, the next bell you hear might announce a wedding no one expected and a union that will reshape your sleepy world forever. You trudge through the misty morning air toward the town square, the ground still slick with dew that kisses your boots and sends little shivers up your spine. Lanterns flicker one last time before the sunrise claims the sky, and you hear a deep, resonant thrum that vibrates through the cobblestones like a giant drum beat, announcing something momentous. Heads turn, breaths hitch, and the chatter falls silent as the beastly suitor arrives. He steps into view through the archway of the old stone gate, each footfall sounding like thunder muffled by woolen cloaks. Thick fur swathes his broad shoulders, dyed in earthy browns and smoky grays, and his boots leave muddied imprints on the square's mosaic tiles. You probably won't survive this sight without blinking twice. His silhouette towers more massive than any man you've ever seen. Yet there's a grace in his gait, as though he belongs to both the wild and polite society. Candlelight glints off a pair of brass buckles on his bracer, revealing faint etchings of vines and snarling wolves. A mainstream historical fact slips into your mind. In medieval Europe, sumptuary laws strictly dictated which fabrics and furs one could wear, with royalty monopolizing ermine and sable commoners relegated to sheepskin or rabbit fur for warmth. Yet here stands our suitor, wrapped in pelts no villager is permitted to own, suggesting influence that eclipses even the mayor's gilded signet. You can't help but wonder who tangled political favor to cloak him in such forbidden finery. As the beast advances, the villagers part like reeds in a breeze, giving him a corridor of trembling onlookers. You note the way he tilts his head, examining each face through gold-flecked amber eyes that gleam with unnerving intelligence. A strand of hair, dark as raven wings, escapes his braided mane, brushing his forehead, as though seeking release. His nose broad and flattened flares, once inhaling the mixed scents of fresh-baked bread, damp earth, and fear. You probably won't survive this tense tableau without a quip, so imagine someone muttering, "He's like a walking tax audit, strict, intimidating," and you're terrified he'll sniff out every penny you owe. A ripple of nervous laughter follows, but the beast's lips curl into something resembling amusement before flattening into a serious line. Beneath the fur and fearsome visage, there's a controlled elegance in his carriage, an unexpected juxtaposition that makes your heart thump a warning drumbeat. Some whispers drift through the crowd. They say he once wrestled a boar thrice his size, and won. A baker's daughter clutches her shawl, voice trembling. Historians still argue whether tales of beastmen sprang from real encounters with wild men of the woods, or were mere allegories for noble hunts. That phrase hangs like a suspended note, reminding you that even scholars can't agree if these wild men were actual forest dwellers or fanciful beasts born of courtly myth. A fringe detail surfaces among the gossip. An old woodsman claims to have seen a creature exactly like him, lurking by the riverbank, whispering to wolves under a blood moon. It sang to them the woodsman swears a lullaby of bones and moonlight. Most scoff, but a few nod, recalling strange howls that drifted through the trees on nights when the moon was full and heavy. You trudge closer to inspect the beast's features, each one etched by twilight's shadow and candle flame. His hands, you notice, are enormous, and furred fingers tipped with nails dark as obsidian. When he brushes a hand against a pillar, dust motes swirl in its wake like tiny specters dancing in a sunbeam. You might joke that he's the kingdom's most extreme chimney sweep, fur claws and soot included, but the sight sends a fresh thrill through your veins. 3 jokes in 1 section check. Beside you, the mayor steps forward, coat bedecked in polished buttons and ribbons. His voice wobbles as he addresses the beast. My lord, we welcome you." The beast inclines his head, brass buckles chanting softly, like wind chimes in a storm. When he speaks, his voice rumbles like distant thunder rolling over hills. Let the preparations commence. It's formal, yet gentle, as if he's apologizing for the commotion he's caused simply by existing. An elderly scholar in the crowd whispers to a colleague. In bestiaries, wild men symbolized untamed nature. Historians still argue whether those compendiums influenced genuine hunts for such creatures, or simply scared monks into writing more florid manuscripts. You recall those bestiaries volumes overflowing with griffins, manticores, and unicorns, each page a parade of impossibilities. Now here's a living entry trudging into your reality with fur boots and an iron-studded gait. The beast's eyes settle on the mayor's trembling form, and for a moment you swear you see a spark of empathy flicker behind those amber depths. He extends a gloved hand note. 1 glove is missing toward the town crier, who stammers and accepts it with a curtsy. That simple touch, gentle as falling snow, ripples through the assembled throng, easing taut nerves by the fraction of a heartbeat. Beneath the myth and muscle, there's a courtesy that most expect only from nobles in silk breeches. A collective gasp rises when the beast removes his hood, revealing angular features framed by the braided mane. The sun peaks above the eastern rooftops, illuminating flecks of silver at his temples, evidence of age and wisdom. His ears pointed and fur-tufted at the tips twitch as they catch distant bird calls. The fur that hides thick horns tapers just enough for you to glimpse their curved outline like antlers forged from moonlight. You trudge closer, yet drawn by a mix of fear and fascination. As you peer up at him, the air around his presence smells faintly of cedar and something else, something wild, like the scent of centuries-old forest floor. A boy, munching on stale biscuit, nudges you, whispering, "Do you think he knows how handsome he is? Or does he just think, 'I'm big, I'm hairy, and I'll have my bride'?" You grin and murmur back, probably writing notes on how to fix his armor after the wedding night. From the opposite side of the square, a soothsayer's voice ripples through the hush. Beast or nobleman magic binds this union. She steps forward, eyes gleaming. Historians still argue whether enchantment can alter true nature or merely illuminate hidden truths. Her fringe tidbit she once witnessed a mirror that reflected a person's soul, not their face, whistles through the air like a ghostly invitation to question everything you see. The beast inclines his head to acknowledge the soothsayer, and she bows so low her silken shawl brushes the ground. He waits patiently as she straightens, then nods, once an unspoken pact forged in that brief exchange. You breathe in, feeling the weight of every story, every whispered legend, and every scholarly debate that lingers in the cool morning light. Then just as suddenly as he appeared, the beast turns and strides toward the grand hall, his fur cape billowing like a storm cloud crossing the sun. The townsfolk part before him, leaving a crimson carpet laid out by eager hands, roses plucked at dawn petals, still dewy confetti of love and fear mingled beneath his boots. You probably won't survive this sight without another slow blink, so give your eyelids a gentle stretch. As he passes the bishop, a stout figure in embroidered robes steps forward, holding an ornate scroll sealed with crimson wax. The crowd hushes again. Whatever that scroll contains will set the date for the wedding that has, until now, only existed in rumors. You feel your pulse quicken, not from dread, but from the heady mix of anticipation and curiosity that pulses like a second heartbeat in the air. A stray dog barks once, twice before dashing off toward an alley where 2 children giggle at its audacity. You recall that playful interruption as the perfect punctuation to this surreal scene. A beastly suitor clad in forbidden fur, a trembling mayor, a hush of collective wonder, and you wide-eyed and trudging forward on this path of enchantment. And so, With the beastly suitor fully unveiled and heading into the heart of the village, your journey presses on. What secrets lie beneath that fur-clad exterior? What hidden scars or hopes dwell in those amber eyes? And perhaps most crucially, will Cupid's misfired arrow ever find its true home? The grand doors of the village hall creak open, releasing a hush that settles like velvet over the assembled crowd. You trudge up the shallow stone steps, boots clicking against worn flagstones, and pause as the mayor, flushed with nerves, unfurls an ornate proclamation scroll before you all. His quill trembles as he speaks. By order of his grace, the beastly suitor is hereby betrothed to the esteemed Miss Rosalind Baker, daughter of Master Duckert, the village's most esteemed baker. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd, followed by a stifled cough or two. Even the pigeons coo in startled protest. You probably won't survive this without wincing at the absurdity. Imagine a fur-clad giant forcing a wedding on a baker's daughter who still dreams of candlelit dances, not clawed embraces. Yet here it stands sealed with a wax emblem depicting crossed arrows and a snarling wolf's head. A mainstream historical fact drifts in medieval proclamations of marriage often involved public readings in the marketplace, with the couple's consent assumed rather than explicitly stated. In many regions, a bride's refusal could spark legal battles or social ruin, as familial honor hinged on obedience. You catch a murmur, "Did she even agree to this?" Meanwhile, a fringe nugget surfaces in the mayor's stammered announcement. Rumor claims that in some distant shire, a misaligned proclamation once bound a miller's son to wed a traveling minstrel, only to discover she was a shape-shifting fae in disguise. Historians still argue whether such tales were cautionary myths or satirical barbs at arranged marriages, but they make for great fireside gossip. You trudge closer to the scroll, noting its intricate calligraphy, each letter adorned with tiny vine motifs and hidden faces, an illuminator's playful flourish, perhaps, or a veiled warning. The bishop beside the mayor rubs his beard thoughtfully, then clears his throat. Let it be known that vows shall be exchanged this fortnight under the ancient oak by the brook. A hush follows, as though the oak itself holds its breath at the announcement. As the mayor rolls up the scroll, a woman shrieks, half laugh, half cry, her voice tremulous like a disturbed harp string. But she's never met him. The baker's daughter, standing just beyond the steps, grips the wooden railing so tightly, her knuckles blanch. Her heart races like a startled sparrow. You probably won't survive this without offering her a comforting nod. But of course, you're simply one of many wide-eyed spectators. A mainstream fact emerges from whispered conversations. Medieval brides often didn't meet their grooms until the wedding day, sometimes veiled behind silken drapes. In some noble courts, the groom was delivered to the bridal chamber in hopes of preserving modesty, though less modest parties involved rooftop serenades and pillow fights, depending on local custom. Amid these half-truths, a local herbalist mutters about a fringe remedy. A sprig of mugwort hidden in her bodice could grant her dreams of courage. Mugwort believed to bridge worlds featured in folk magic to embolden the timid. Historians still argue whether such herbs truly influenced dreams or simply added aroma to restless nights. You trudge forward, noting the bride's powdered cheeks paling under the morning sun. Her hair, woven with ribbons and wildflowers, trembles with each breath. She looks every bit the picture of duty-bound resignation, silken dress hugging her shoulders, embroidered shoes peeking from beneath the hem. Yet in her eyes flickers something else, defiance, or perhaps a desperate hope that fate might yet be overturned. A shrill cry breaks out as the soothsayer shuffles forward, staff tapping in rhythm with her anxious steps. She raises a gnarled finger at the proclamation. Words on parchment hold power, but only when hearts consent. Historians still argue whether ink-bound contracts outweigh the will of the soul. She plucks a thread from her cloak and twines it around the scroll's wax seal, as if to tether magic itself. Someone in the crowd snorts. What if she tears it? Heads swivel. A half-dozen conspiratorial whispers debate the legal fallout of such an act. You probably won't survive without anticipating her next move. Will she seize that scroll and shred it in a gust of rebellion? Or will she tuck it away, bound by duty and fear of scandal? Nearby, the beastly suitor stands motionless, framed by the grand doorway's shadow. He watches her with something like regret shining in those amber eyes. The morning light catches the curve of his horns, highlighting the subtle grooves worn smooth by time. You catch another mainstream tidbit: horn carving in medieval times held symbolic meaning. Spiral patterns represented life cycles, while straight ridges denoted steadfast loyalty. Whether he carved them or not remains a shadowy question. A fringe detail surfaces: a wandering bard once sang of a horned suitor whose vows broke a centuries-old curse. Historians still argue whether the curse ever existed or if the ballad served to scare unfaithful lovers. That you cannot confirm, but it drifts through the gossip like a curious melody. The mayor clears his throat again, voice wavering. Let all who object speak now or forever hold their peace. A hush falls so thick you could slice it with a scholar's pen. You notice a dozen villagers exchange glances, some stoic, some eager, and some obviously torn. Consent by silence is a tricky gambit, especially when magic swirls unseen. The baker's daughter draws a trembling breath, heart pounding like a drum echoing through her ribs. She steps forward, gaze fixed on the beast. For a heartbeat, the world holds still, birds cease their songs, the breeze halts its whisper, and even the distant toll of a bell seems to pause. You probably won't survive this moment without feeling your pulse quicken in solidarity. Then she raises her chin, and the jaws of the crowd drop. What she says next could change everything: an act of defiance or a surrender to forces beyond her ken. But you'll have to wait until the next section to discover which path she chooses. You trudge through the narrow corridor behind the bride's chambers, where silken gowns hang like pale ghosts in the dim morning light. The air is thick with the scent of rosewater and heated iron as attendants bustle around, adjusting ribbons and knotting corsets. The bride, Miss Rosalind Baker, paces like a caged bird, her slippered feet tapping a frantic rhythm on the stone floor. You probably won't survive this without feeling your own heart thump in tandem. A chambermaid delicately brushes out the final knot in Rosalind's auburn locks, murmuring, "Your Highness, pardon me, I mean, Miss Baker, the seamstress, awaits." The seamstress, a stout woman with nimble fingers and a perpetual frown, stands over a half-finished veil embroidered with tiny lilies, symbols of purity and hope. Yet Rosalind's eyes are distant, fixed on a locked window overlooking the square where the beastly suitor's silhouette still lingers. You trudge to a gilt-framed mirror and watch as the bride forces a calm mask onto her face. Her cheeks glow like dawn's first light, but her lips tremble. She traces a finger along the hem of her gown and whispers, "I never imagined I'd marry a stranger, let alone something that snarls." A mainstream historical fact drifts in 13th century England. Noble brides were often forbidden from seeing their prospective grooms until the moment the veil lifted at the altar. Consent was assumed once the bride made her public appearance, leaving many women bound by social expectation rather than personal choice. Rosalind's shoulders shake with a quiet breath. You probably won't survive this scene without wanting to reach through the mirror and offer a reassuring squeeze, but instead, you trudge back to the bustle of preparation. A footman sets a polished dagger on a velvet cushion, whispering that some believe its steel may sever unwanted bonds. Historians still argue whether such escape daggers were ever intended for self-defense or simply ceremonial tokens of autonomy. A fringe tidbit surfaces as the seamstress snips a stray thread. She insists that if a bride sneaks a sprig of nightshade into her bouquet, it grants her the power to vanish from unwanted ceremonies. Most call it superstitious nonsense. Nightshade is notoriously poisonous, but legend claims its petals blur footsteps when tossed at the threshold. You trudge closer, squinting at the half-stitched veil, and imagine Rosalind tossing flowers behind her as she slips away into the night. Nearby, the steward rattles a set of keys, each one glinting with promise. The private passage leads beneath the bell tower, he murmurs. It opens only with the mayor's signet. You feel the bride's gaze latch onto the keys, hope flickering as if the lock itself might yield her freedom. You probably won't survive without wondering if she's considering a midnight escape through damp tunnels lined with rattling chains and echoing with distant drips. A chamberlain rushes in breathless. Lady Rosalind the bishop requests your presence for final blessings. Rosalind's eyes narrow. Blessings or chains, she can't tell. You trudge behind her as she glides past ornate tapestries depicting saints warding off dragons and demons. In one panel, an angel wields a flaming sword. In another, a demon tiptoes away with a sheepish grin. It's a reminder that medieval art often blurred the line between sacred tale and moral jest. The bishop solemn in his embroidered robes raises a silver chalice to her lips. "Take this sip of consecrated water, child," he intones. "Let it wash away hesitation and bind your vows to sacred duty." She drinks the liquid cool and metallic on her tongue, and you notice her fingers curling around the goblet's stem, white-knuckled but steady. A mainstream note surfaces holy water was often salted to preserve purity, but some added honey for palatable blessing. Whether honey ever sweetened reluctance remains unrecorded. Rosalind steps back, veil slipping from her shoulders. She glances at the dagger on the velvet cushion, then at the keys in the steward's hand. Her reflection flickers in the chalice's gleam, and you probably won't survive without sensing her internal battle duty versus desire, fear versus hope. You trudge forward, drawn into her gaze. Suddenly a chambermaid gasps. A seam has split along the gown's hem, small as if pried apart. Rosalind's breath catches. "Someone doesn't want me to slip away," she whispers. The seamstress frowns and mutters of cursed needles and sabotaged stitches. Fringe lore holds that jealous rivals once enchanted bridal gowns with self-rending thread to ensure compliance. Historians still argue whether such enchantments ever existed beyond local whispers, or if seamstresses simply grew tired of late-night fittings. Rosalind steps toward the dagger, her hand hovering above its hilt. "If only," she breathes. You probably won't survive without imagining the clang of steel in the dead of night as she carves her own fate. Yet just as her fingertips brush the dagger's guard, a muffled knock echoes through the corridor. She whirls, heart-pounding like a war drum, and the chamber door swings open. A page enters, cheeks flushed. "My lady the beastly suitor awaits your vows in the hall." The words hang in the air, heavy as a stone altar. Rosalind's eyes widen and you trudge to her side, sensing the narrowing of her choices. The seamstress gathers her courage and steps forward. "Mistress, may I suggest one last adornment?" She produces a sprig of mugwort from beneath her apron. "For courage in dreams." Rosalind lifts the herb, eyes softening. You note the contrast, a toxic plant offered as solace. You probably won't survive without appreciating the irony. With trembling fingers, Rosalind tucks the mugwort into the bodice's folds, its silver-green leaves peeking out like tiny banners of defiance. The whisper of herbal lore drifts around you. Mugwort was burned at midsummer to ward off nightmares, but some swore it invited prophetic visions. Historians still argue whether dream herbs influenced destiny or merely brightened restless nights. She inhales its faint herbal perfume and exhales a long sigh. The decision crystallizes in her gaze. You trudge behind her as she strides toward the heavy wooden door, the seamstress trailing. Each step echoes like a heartbeat, pounding against a chest, an announcement that fate is alive and pulsing. The corridor light dims as she reaches the threshold. She pauses, hand on the latch, and glances at you, an unspoken plea. You probably won't survive this without leaning in to shout encouragement, but instead, you offer a reassuring nod. Her jaw tightens, and she steps through veil billowing behind her like pale mist on a moonlit lake. Behind you, the seam splits further, the veil's lilies fluttering as if in applause or warning. The distant toll of a bell rumbles through the hall, marking the hour. In one fluid motion, Rosalind ascends the dais face set, and determined dagger hidden at her waist, and mugwort tucked close to her heart. You hold your breath, sensing that her frantic preparations have brought her here, not just to a wedding, but to a crossroads between compliance and courage. In moments, we'll learn whether that delicate bouquet and sharpened blade will sway the course of true love or trap her in spun gold obligations. You trudge into the great hall where sunlight streams through stained glass windows, igniting motes of dust to swirl like lazy fireflies. Long oak tables stand set for a feast that remains untouched, goblets gleaming like captured stars. At the far end, beneath a carved canopy, the beastly suitor waits, his posture regal, yet laced with tension that radiates through the hall. As you approach, your pulse flickers once like a candle threatened by a draft, because this is the first real glimpse of the creature beyond whispered rumors. Candlelight dances across his amber eyes, revealing flecks of gold around the pupils, as if he carries a sliver of sunrise within. You probably won't survive this without blinking twice at the contrast between his rough fur and the delicate lace at his cuff. A mainstream fact drifts in on the hushed air. Medieval audiences often used heraldry, bold symbols on banners and clothing to convey lineage and allegiance. The beast's cloak bears a crest of entwined thorns and blooming roses, signifying both protection and passion. Few villagers recognize the emblem, but those who do exchange murmurs about a noble house thought long extinct. You note a fringe whisper. Some claim that house vanished after a curse twisted their line into untamed forms. Historians still argue whether the curse was metaphorical, a stain on reputation, or literal magic. Someone murmurs, voice trembling like an unsteady lute string. The phrase hangs, bridging fact and folklore in a delicious tension that makes your skin prickle. The bride appears at the foot of the dais, her gown a pale shimmer against the dark tapestries. Each step she takes echoes petals crunching beneath delicate slippers, mugwort tucked near her heart, and dagger concealed at her side. You trudge alongside her, feeling the air shift as she draws closer to the unknown. A fringe detail flits through your mind. It's said that if you meet a cursed noble's gaze, you glimpse their true nature reflected in your own soul. Probably why he wears that serious mask. You murmur to yourself, marveling at the idea that each flicker in his eye might reveal her fears or her deepest yearnings. As the bride reaches the dais, the beast inclines his head. For a heartbeat, all is still the flicker of torches, the murmur of breaths, the pregnant pause of destiny. Then, in a voice as soft as velvet and as firm as steel, he addresses her. Miss Baker, will you consent to bind your fate to mine? You probably won't survive this without noticing the quiver in Rosalind's hand as she lifts the dagger's pommel from beneath her skirts. Yet before she can speak, the soothsayer's voice ripples through the hall. Words spoken under enchanted circumstances may twist fate beyond recall. Historians still argue whether consent given in fear holds any weight. A stir ripples across the crowd. The mayor glances at the bishop, whose lips press into a thin line. Even the heralds shift nervously, unsure if they should summon scribes to record a refusal. The stale air hums with potential of love, of defiance, of spells, yet unspoken. You trudge closer to the dais, heart pounding like a war drum set to a lullaby tempo. The bride's eyes meet the beast's amber gaze, and in that moment the world narrows to two figures standing amid ornate pillars and silent witnesses. Petals drift from overhead garlands, twirling like soft punctuation marks for a question with no easy answer. As she opens her mouth, you sense that every eye holds its breath. What emerges, whether a refusal, a plea, or an unexpected confession, will ripple outward, shaping destinies in ways no one yet imagines. Your boots rest lightly on the dais step, ready to witness her next whisper as the hall holds its anxious silence. You trudge back into the marketplace just as the echoes of the ceremony drift on the breeze, mingling with the clatter of merchant stalls and the tangy scent of freshly baked pretzels. The air vibrates with a curious blend of fear and fascination, like watching a thunderstorm from behind a sturdy window, thrilling yet unsettling. You probably won't survive this scene without feeling your heart tickle with excitement. Vendors hastily lower their wares, spices, pottery, and bolts of wool eyes darting toward the dais that still looms in the distance. A fishmonger claps a hand to his mouth, knocking over a basket of herrings that flop across the stones like startled frogs. Did you hear her reply? He hisses, voice pitched so low you almost think he's handing over state secrets. I swear she spoke with the calm of a saint and the fire of a rebel. A mainstream historical fact surfaces as you pass the blacksmith's forge, where ironwork glows red-hot under hammer blows. Medieval markets were regulated by guilds, each with its own rules and improvised flair, like forbidding bakers from peddling bread near butchers to keep cross-contamination at bay. Yet today, no guild rule can contain the gossip erupting faster than sparks from the smith's anvil. You pause at a stall draped in colorful ribbons where a seamstress hawks embroidered handkerchiefs. She leans in voice conspiratorial. They say the bride's eyes shone brighter than any gem in our Lord's treasury. You might joke that she's auditioning for the kingdom's top influencer role, Medieval Market Mood Weddings edition, but instead, you trudge on, savoring her enthusiasm. A fringe tidbit curls through the buzz. One old teller claims that in a neighboring shire, spectators witnessed the bride's reflection ripple in her mirror, as if underwater, hinting at deeper enchantment. Historians still argue whether such distortions were optical illusions or real magic at play. Someone mutters, casting a wary glance at the grand hall's direction. That phrase floats in the air like drifting petals, reminding you that even skepticism can't choke off wonder. You probably won't survive this without noticing how the townsfolk cluster in knots of 3 and 4 wives, clutching shawls, tighter children perched on barrels, and travelers pausing mid-journey to gawk. A tinker stops hammering a copper kettle and mumbles, "I've seen bears dressed in cloaks, but never a beast promising matrimony." A round of nervous laughter ripples out, punctuated by the nervous tinkle of the tinker's tools. Not far off, the mayor's scribe feverishly scribbles notes into a leather-bound ledger, ink smudged by hurried fingers. You trudge closer, curious if he's recording the bride's exact words or merely jotting down embellished sound bites for future retelling. A passerby quips he's more excited than a puppy at feeding time and earns a few chortles, but the scribe doesn't look up, absorbed in his scholarly fever. A mainstream note drifts in as a group of scholars, identifiable by their simple but well-worn robes, stride through the crowd. Medieval universities often sent emissaries to observe significant events, coronations, wars, and occasionally remarkable weddings that broke tradition. Historians still argue whether those emissaries reported facts or embellished tales to secure future funding. You nearly grin at that image, medieval researchers chasing patrons with dramatic anecdotes. A fringe whisper snakes through the chatter, a fence-sitter who claims to have seen the beast tending a wounded sparrow just days ago, coaxing it from its injury with gentle hands. If he can care for a broken bird, maybe his heart isn't all claws and fangs. She sighs. You trudge on, picturing a hulking figure cradling a tiny creature, and your chest warms at the contrast despite yourself. Hope flickers. Nearby, a trio of children reenacts the moment. In miniature, one drapes a woolen cloak over a barrel. The beast, another, brandishes a stick, the dagger, and the third, wearing a makeshift veil of straw, steps forward to recite, "I consent to bind my fate." Their earnest faces draw laughter and applause, a light-hearted break from the tension. You probably won't survive their charming performance without smiling, and you remind yourself that in every age, people cope with the unknown through play. A street musician, lute in hand, improvises a ballad. "Oh, maiden fair with courage rare, who faced a beast with golden glare." His tune wavers like a candle in the wind, but the crowd hums along, lending harmony to uncertainty. In medieval times, oral ballads served as both news report and entertainment, carried by minstrels from town to town. Yet you note how easily these songs could twist facts into legend, so take each refrain with a pinch of salt. As you continue, a woman in widow's weeds clasps a rosary, murmuring prayers for the bride's soul. May her spirit remain free, she intones, voice cracking like a brittle twig. You trudge by, respecting her quiet devotion, but your mind flicks back to the soothsayer's earlier warning. Enchantment can bind more than hearts. It can tether destinies against their will. Historians still argue whether vows uttered under duress held any sanctity in the eyes of the church. Ahead, the fishmonger recovers his herrings, lining them up neatly once more. He sniffs one size dramatically and tucks it back into the basket. "Even my coldest catch feels warmer than that beast's stare," he jokes, sparking laughter that ripples through the market. You probably won't survive this absurd comparison without chuckling at the comfort of shared humor. A sudden hush falls as the town crier appears atop a wooden crate bell in hand. He clears his throat and proclaims, hear ye. The royal courier arrives this eve with a decree from the High Court. Further instructions regarding the union." Gasps and exclamations bubble up. You trudge forward, intrigued by the prospect of outside interference in this local spectacle. Could royal intervention upend the entire affair? The crowd surges toward the crier, eager for fresh news. A merchant nearly drops a bolt of cloth in his haste. A pair of lovers shares a hopeful glance. You stand at the edge of the throng, heart pounding like a drum warning of approaching change. Above you, banners ripple in the breeze, some hastily painted with the beast's crest, others torn as if by doubt's own hand. You probably won't survive this whirl of emotion without a final deep breath. The marketplace hums with stories, half-truths, and open questions. Fear and fascination swirl like autumn leaves caught in a gust, beautiful, chaotic, and impossible to ignore. As the sun dips toward midday, you realize this village is no longer a sleepy hollow, but the epicenter of a living legend. And through it all, you trudge on eyes-wide senses, alert, bearing witness to a community teetering between tradition and transformation. You trudge back through the crowd toward the ivy-clad lecture hall at the edge of town where parchment scrolls and ink-stained robes await in quiet rows. Inside, a dozen scholars, bearded, bespectacled, and somewhat cranky, gather around a long oaken table strewn with dusty tomes and half-empty inkpots. They mutter in hushed Latin, and the local dialect voices low, yet threaded with fierce passion, as if debating whether goose quills or swan feathers make superior writing instruments. A vaulted window streams pale light onto their earnest faces. You probably won't survive this without marveling at the sheer weight of intellectual energy buzzing in the room like a hive of scholarly bees tucked into stone. One scholar, robe stitched with silver thread, slams a palm to the table, rattling quills into the corners. Preposterous, he bellows. The ancient chronicles clearly depict a fey treaty predating any mention of wild men. Another adjusts his spectacles and counters Ba. Those chronicles were penned by court poets seeking patronage. Historians still argue whether they chronicled facts or merely flattery cloaked as history. The phrase settles between them like a challenge, igniting fresh sparks of contention. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind as you glance at a map tacked to the wall. Medieval universities such as Paris and Bologna were hotbeds of debate where disputations could last days, often settling theological quandaries or legal precedents before distracting everyone with spiced wine at evening repasts. Here, however, they're hashing out whether the beastly suitor's lineage was rooted in noble blood or tangled with enchantment. A fringe tidbit emerges when a scholar perched at the head of the table offers a battered leather volume. I found mention of a midnight council convened by forest spirits under a new moon, where humans swore fealty to the old ways. He taps the book reverently. Such rites, he whispers, allegedly bound both man and beast. A few classmates lean in nodding, while others roll their eyes so vigorously it's a wonder their hoods don't slip off. You trudge closer, absorbing the scene, a sea of high collars, embroidered hoods, and foreboding grimoires. A page scuttles in, delivering a scroll sealed with wax. A missive from the soothsayer, he announces, breaking the tension. She seeks our counsel on the legality of enchantments in marriage contracts. The table groans, some in indignation, others in scholarly delight. You probably won't survive watching these academics without a chuckle at their earnestness. One pushes his spectacles up his nose and quips, "Perhaps we need a jester to settle this. He's unbiased and only slightly more reliable than a spring thermometer." Laughter leaks around the table, easing the tension like warm oil on squeaky hinges. Behind you, a tapestry depicting ancient kings wrestling serpents trembles in a draught. The lead scholar gestures at it, symbols of beastly power, yet also of divine favor. We must decide if our suitor's crest signifies a cursed lineage or a blessed transformation. His voice resonates like gravel sliding down hills, serious yet oddly compelling. A side debate erupts over the origin of heraldic beasts. Did heralds invent mythical creatures to intimidate foes? Someone wonders. Historians still argue whether bestiaries influenced heraldry or vice versa. Another replies, and halfway through their exchange, they realize they've spent 10 minutes debating dragon color precedence ghouls or azure. A mainstream note surfaces when a young scholar references medieval legal treatises in the 13th century canon law, addressed betrothals, and the weight of consent. Yet the ambiguity of enchanted consent remained unaddressed, leaving room for both loopholes and legendary loophole jumping. A chorus of oohs and ahs greets this insight as if they've just uncovered the holy grail of marital law. Suddenly, the soothsayer herself appears in the doorway cloak, billowing like storm clouds. She glides to the head of the table and lays a gnarled hand on the scroll. Legalities matter little to magic, she intones, voice low and echoing. I have seen bonds forged by moonlight that no parchment can sever. She offers a fringe tidbit. Once an enchantress trapped a duke in a mirror for 7 years until he dreamt the true vow. A few gasp. Others shake their heads, labeling it an absurd legend. You probably won't survive her dramatic entrance without pausing for effect. The scholars lean in as if drawn by the magnetism of her words. A candle sputters and she smiles enigmatically. Committees can debate forever, but the heart will speak its truth when stirred. The room falls silent, each person locked in reflection. One brash scholar stands robes, brushing the floor, voice trembling with conviction. Then let the heart decide. Let a trial of compassion determine if the beast's intentions are pure. He paces knuckles white. We'll observe his deeds firsthand. Mercy, humility, generosity. Another scholar retorts, mercy, the beast's size strikes terror in the bravest knight. How do we measure humility in claws and fangs? You trudge down between the table and the wall, heart racing in solidarity with the befuddled academics. The soothsayer raises both hands. We shall compose 3 tests: compassion for the meek, courage in adversity, and loyalty amidst temptation. She unfurls 3 parchments stamped with arcane symbols. Those who pass these trials prove their bond is unbreakable. A mainstream fact surfaces as you note the trials echo ancient chivalric challenges like the questing beast of Arthurian lore or the tests of Sir Gawain's honor. These tales entwine beastly trials with moral reckoning, reminding you that legends often shape reality as much as they reflect it. A fringe whisper drifts from an ivory pillar. I heard the trials are drawn from druidic rites. Historians still argue whether druids ever wielded such formalized sequences or only whispered them to oak trees. The scholars murmur, intrigued by the druidic link pencils scratching across paper as they scribble notes. You probably won't survive their fervor without feeling the urge to place a bet on which trial will expose the beast's true nature. Is it mercy for a bog-bound hare, courage when asked to step into a shadowed cave, or loyalty tested by a phantom bride calling his name? Each scenario crackles with possibility. The soothsayer traces symbols on a slate, a heart, a faux sword, and intertwined rings. Let these symbols guide our path, she declares, chalk scratching on stone. The scholars nod, unanimous at last, though unanimity among academics feels as likely as a dragon sighting at dawn. With the trials defined, the crowd outside the lecture hall awaits word. You trudge back toward the marketplace, mind buzzing with learned debate and mystical theories. The village's fate now rests on scholarly dispute, married to fringe magic ingredients that blend danger and delight in equal measure. As you step into the sunlight, you catch a glimpse of the beast watching from a window above amber eyes, narrowing in understanding. Below, scholars and soothsayer alike pore over parchments, their discourse shaping destiny as surely as Cupid's arrow mislaid. You probably won't survive this tale without one last smile, because in a world torn between lore and law, sometimes the only certainty is the thrill of the question. You trudge down a winding lane whose cobblestones have been polished slick by centuries of footsteps, guided by torchlight that dances against ivy-draped walls. The air smells of damp moss and distant smoke from hearth fires. Ahead, you glimpse the soothsayer's modest cottage, its door slightly ajar, lanterns hung in the windows like watchful eyes. Tonight, she offers a fringe ritual purported to undo wild magic, an ancient rite older than the village itself. Inside the room is cramped, yet warm, lined with shelves of tinctures, feathers, and curious trinkets. A mortar and pestle sit on a low table beside a bowl of moon water, shimmering faintly with silver motes. You probably won't survive this scene without leaning closer, drawn by the intriguing hush of forbidden knowledge. The soothsayer beckons you forward, voice soft as moth wings. This ritual, she murmurs, is said to unravel enchantments woven by misfired arrows and wayward fae. It was recorded in a lost codex stolen by river pirates centuries ago. She pauses, letting the weight of that claim settle. A mainstream historical fact flits through your mind. Medieval grimoires often circulated, clandestinely copied in hidden scriptoria and traded under cloak and dagger. Yet most of those tomes have vanished, leaving scholars to debate their contents and authenticity. The soothsayer spreads a tattered cloth on the floor, upon which she arranges 3 items: a silver mirror, a sprig of rowan, and a handful of white pebbles from the brook's bed. Each represents a pillar of the right reflection protection and grounding, she explains. Rowan branches believed to guard against enchantment, featured prominently in folk magic, historians still argue whether those traditions stemmed from pagan rites or were later Christian appropriations to co-opt local beliefs. She instructs you to hold the mirror aloft, angling it to catch moonlight filtering through the window. As its surface flickers with pale radiance, she sprinkles salt into the bowl of moon water, chanting an incantation in a tongue that feels older than time. The salt swirls, dissolving in patterns that resemble tangled vines. You probably won't survive without feeling a shiver crawl up your spine as the room grows hushed, the only sound the soft drip of water echoing like a heartbeat. Next, she hands you the rowan sprig. You press its crimson berries between thumb and forefinger, inhaling a scent like juniper and wind-swept heather. Pass this before the beast's shadow, she instructs, to shield him from his own cursed lineage. Fringe lore holds that rowan could sever bonds of magic when carried in a left hand, though some claimed it invited restless spirits. You note that the soothsayer's left palm bears a faint scar, an unspoken testament to past rites. The mirror's reflection catches the flicker of your own face, ghostly pale. As you peer into it, she recites another line: "Reveal the arrow's weave, disentangle the heart's sleeve." You watch your lips move in mirror image and echo of reality. Scholars still argue whether mirror gazing ever served practical divination or merely amplified the sitter's own subconscious fears. Finally, she places the pebbles at your feet, instructing you to stand barefoot upon them. The cool stones press against your soles, grounding you to the earth's pulse. Feel the stability of the land, she whispers. Magic thrives on imbalance, restore equilibrium, and enchantment falters. A fringe belief claims that these brook pebbles were once kissed by river nymphs and thus carry ancient currents of neutralizing power. Whether those nymphs truly existed or were metaphors for water's flow is a debate still stirring among folklorists. With each element in place, the soothsayer lights 3 black candles arranged in a triangle around you. The flames gutter and stretch, casting wild shadows that flicker like restless spirits. You probably won't survive this without the urge to close your eyes, but instead, you focus on the ritual's cadence. Chant, stir, sprinkle, breathe. She begins to circle the triangle, chanting again. Her robes sweep the floor, whispering secrets in their wake. As her voice rises, the mirror cracks thin lines spiderwebbing across its surface, each fissure humming with unseen energy. You catch a reflection of the cracked glass, not just your face, but shapes shifting behind you: an arrow's feather, a beast's claw, a bride's fluttering heart. By moonlit shard and riverstone, unbind the spell that's overgrown, she intones, voice rising to a crescendo. The candles flare, wind seeming to rise from nowhere, swirling the rowan sprig's leaves in a frenzied dance. Then, as suddenly as it began, the winds drop, the candles settle, and the shattered mirror lies still on the cloth, its surface now dull and black, where the cracks sever reflected light. A hush follows. You probably won't survive this without feeling the aftershock, a tingling hum along your nerves, the echo of magic undone. The soothsayer kneels, gathering the rowan and pebbles into a small pouch. This pouch, she murmurs, pressing it into your hands, carry it to the beast. Let him wear it against his heart. Should the enchantment linger, the pouch will warm in his palm. A mainstream insight surfaces: medieval amulets often contained organic materials, herbs, stones, even bits of metal wrapped and consecrated to protect the bearer. Their efficacy, of course, was as much faith as material makeup, yet belief lent them palpable power in the minds of wearers and observers alike. You rise, pouch warm against your palm, and notice the soothsayer's eyes glimmer. Beware, she cautions, voice low. Such rites can backfire if offered without true intent. The heart must willingly accept the gift. Historians still argue whether forced rituals carried the same potency as those freely embraced, a nuance that cost many an unwitting soul more than they bargained for. You step outside, night offering its cool embrace. The village rooftops slumber under starlight, unaware that destiny sits heavy in your pocket. You trudge onward, each footfall echoing the hush of hearts poised between hope and fear. Somewhere beyond, the beast stirs in his chamber, amber eyes waiting. As you approach the grand hall's doors, the pouch pulses softly, a reminder that magic like love requires both balance and consent. You probably won't survive this without a final stretch and breath, because soon you'll stand once more before the beastly suitor, armed not with steel or scroll, but with a ritual's fragile promise to untangle Cupid's misfired arrow. You trudge through the village's back alleys under a low, silvered moon, each step muffled by a thin carpet of fallen leaves and the soft murmur of nocturnal creatures awakening. Lanterns along the cobblestones glimmer like wavering stars, guiding you toward the ancient stone bridge that arches over the murmuring brook. Tonight, you'll broker a midnight truce between fearful villagers and the beastly suitor, an accord born of necessity rather than trust, yet more delicate than spun glass. At the bridge's center, torchbearers stand guard, their flames reflecting in the dark water below. You probably won't survive this scene without inhaling that crisp night air tinged with wood smoke and damp earth. Beside you, the mayor's trembling lantern stutters a visual echo of his nerves. He asked for parley, the mayor whispers, voice barely above the brook's lullaby. He wishes to ensure no harm befalls your kin, if I agree to his terms. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. In medieval Europe, truces often negotiated at neutral ground, such as bridges or market crossroads, allowed warring factions respite to exchange captives trade or settle disputes. Such parleys carried strict codes of conduct. Violence committed during them was considered dishonorable, often punishable by exile or execution. Here, however, the dispute is not between armies, but between a village and its unexpected suitor. You step onto the bridge's center, balanced between two worlds, the villagers' flickering torches to the east and the beast's single lantern-lit figure to the west. The air hums with tension like a drawn bowstring, ready to unleash its bolt. You probably won't survive without noticing the way the beast's fur ripples under moonlight, each strand outlined in silver. He stands, tall arms, relaxed but ready eyes fixed on the mayor as if gauging both sincerity and fear. Thank you for coming. The beast's voice rumbles across the water. It's a courteous salve on frayed nerves, but the echo feels ancient, like the resonant call of a horn under vaulted arches. A fringe tidbit surfaces in your memory. Some woodsmen swear that wild men negotiated peace with humans long before Christian rulers codified truce laws, guided instead by primal oaths sworn on wolf's fang and oak leaf. Historians still argue whether those pacts held weight or served purely symbolic roles in early tribal diplomacy. You trudge forward, passing a bundle of herbs laid at the beast's feet, sage lavender and rosemary tied with coarse twine, the soothsayer's handiwork, no doubt fragrant guardians to purify intentions. He inclines his head toward the bundle and says, I bring no harm to this village. I seek only to fulfill the bond woven by Cupid's misfire with honor. His words float over the brook like drifting petals. You probably won't survive without sensing their sincerity. The mayor swallows and nods, stepping beside you. We require assurance, he begins, voice cracking like a thin branch underweight, that no child, no elder, no livestock suffers for this strange union. A huddle of villagers behind you nod in agreement, faces bright with candlelight and fear. You watch the beast study the mayor's face, amber eyes softening. I swear upon my crest and the memory of my ancestors, he replies, to safeguard every soul under this village's rooftops. Should I ever betray this vow, may my house fall into shadow. He extends one gloved hand, palm up, a gesture of fealty that reverberates across centuries. A mainstream fact glimmers in your mind, oaths sworn on blood, or family relics such as heraldic crests held immense weight in medieval culture, binding nobles and commoners alike to codes of conduct under threat of divine or social reprisal. Breaking such an oath risked spiritual condemnation and public disgrace. Here, the beast leverages that tradition to forge trust. The mayor hesitates, then places his own hand in the beast's. The villagers exhale in collective relief, like wind leaving a tightly drawn sail. You probably won't survive this moment without a gentle smile at the power of a simple clasp. But before the peace can settle, a voice rings out from the village side. Young Thomas, the blacksmith's apprentice, steps forward, hammer strapped at his belt. What of the survivors of last week's wolf attack, he demands. My sister's sheep were slaughtered wolves, left them torn, and we have no proof it wasn't your kin." He glances accusingly at the beast's fur. The beast's eyes flash with something fierce, yet controlled. "I hunt to survive, not to terrorize. Bring me proof," he says, voice calm as rippling water. "If I erred, I will make restitution." A fringe detail slips through your thoughts. Medieval fines for livestock. Loss could include compensation in sheep or bushels of grain, called vergild, for animals, and varied by status of victim and accused. Some rural communities recorded these disputes in parish rolls, though most were settled informally. The beast's offer echoes that ancient practice, even though fur and fangs complicate traditional categories. You trudge closer, noting the mayor's hopeful gaze. "We will gather testimony," the mayor says. "And if you hold true to your word, all will be well." He turns to you and nods. "Thank you for guiding us." As you step back, the beast picks up a smooth white pebble, likely from the ritual pouch, and hands it to Thomas. "Keep this," he says quietly. "If my oath holds, it will remain cool. If not, it will burn in your hand." The apprentice's eyes widen, and he accepts the pebble with tentative fingers. A hush falls across the bridge, torchlights wavering as if unsure whether to burn or quench. You probably won't survive this without noting how fragile peace feels like a spider's thread strung across a canyon. Then the beast turns and inclines his head. To you, amber gaze warm. "Thank you," he says, in your direction. "You have been a steady guide in this uncertain hour." You shrug, cheeks warming, and murmur, just trudging along. A leaf drifts down from the trees overhead, twirling before landing in the brook. The sound, a soft plunk, seems louder than expected, punctuating the moment like a period at the end of a fraught sentence. As the mayor and beast release hands, torchbearers lower their flames in symbolic gesture, and villagers step forward to reclaim the bridge. The truce stands a fragile tapestry woven of oaths, rituals, and courageous hearts. You probably won't survive this section without stretching your legs and smiling at the memory of unity found in moonlit negotiations. The bridge creaks in approval, a silent witness to a pact that balances fear and hope. With dawn yet hours away, you trudge back toward the sleeping village, each step echoing promises made and debts to be honored. The midnight truce holds for now, binding beast and baker's daughter suitor and townsfolk in a covenant that Cupid never intended, but that fate demanded. You trudge through the dawn-lit corridor of the grand hall toward a secluded alcove where the beastly suitor claimed he'd meet you, and you assume the bride to share what he called matters of the heart. The air here is still cool, scented faintly with cedar from the carved beams overhead. Lanterns left unlit stand at attention like silent sentries, and the only sound is the soft scuff of your boots against the worn stone floor. You probably won't survive this intimate setting without leaning in, eager for the vulnerable exchange awaiting you. The alcove's walls are draped in tapestries depicting pastoral scenes, hunters at dawn, deer bounding through soft glades, courtiers plucking lyres beside gentle streams. In the center, a low stone bench bears witness to countless confessions, real or imagined. You see Rosalind already there, veil tossed aside, and gown's hem gathered in her lap knees, tucked close. Her auburn hair tumbles freely, catching stray sunbeams like molten copper. Beside her kneels the beast cloak, slipped from one shoulder, revealing a scar that runs from temple to jawline, faint but unmistakable. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Medieval noble portraits often concealed facial scars with veils or artful poses interpreting wounds as either marks of divine favor or reminders of battlefield valor. Yet here, the scar lies bare, a testament neither priest nor painter masked. You probably won't survive this revelation without tracing the unspoken story etched into that line of healed flesh. Rosalind turns to the beast voice, hushed. "I once believed strength was found only in silence, until my husband-to-be bared his wounds before me." Her words feel raw, as if she's stating a truth too tender for open air. She lifts her skirt slightly, revealing a thin puckered scar just above her ankle, and presses a hand there, gentle, protective. You trudge closer, noticing the pale pink line that stands out against her ivory skin. A fringe tidbit surfaces in your mind. Healers' texts from the 14th century recorded that brides sometimes hid burn scars, remnants of hearth accidents, as symbols of sacrifice and domestic prowess. Historians still argue whether these weren't actually ritual burns administered to prove fortitude. One thing's clear, her scar carries a meaning deeper than mere kitchen mishap. The beast inclines his massive head, amber eyes soft with empathy. When I was still learning to wield a blade, he rumbles, voice husky. An arrow slipped its binding and struck me here. He lifts a furred hand to the mark on his face. I fought through days of pain, thinking only of vengeance. But the wound left more than a scar, it left doubt. You probably won't survive his confession without feeling your own breath hitch caught between pity and admiration. Rosalind's hand trembles as she reaches out, placing her palm above his. Doubt is its own burden, she whispers. I believed my path was set baker's daughter to noble wife until Cupid's arrow altered our fates. I felt fear, then rage, then a strange fascination every time our eyes met. Her gaze lingers on his expression, searching for traces of the gentle soul beneath the beastly guise. A mainstream note surfaces confessions of fear before marriage appeared in medieval confessional manuals, offering solace to brides plagued by anxiety over union and dowry alike. Clergy advised that honesty before vows could strengthen marital bonds, though few prescribed sharing wounds as literal proof of vulnerability. He shifts closer, careful to avoid brushing his claws against the stone. Your courage gave me hope, he admits. I saw your fear and chose to lay mine bare. Historians still argue whether such mutual vulnerability was ever encouraged or frowned upon by courtly etiquette, but in my world it saved me from loneliness. His voice trembles on the last word like a bowstring, nearly snapping. You trudge forward until you stand just behind Rosalind's shoulder. The morning light catches the slight sheen of tears in her eyes. I thought I'd be safe with my father's bread oven and dough-streaked aprons, she confides. But that life felt too small once the arrow found me. I needed meaning, even if it meant facing a creature whose very name scared me. She forces a small smile, but it trembles. A fringe element drifts in folklore held that sharing scars could transfer pain and magic between individuals, a form of sympathetic resonance. Some fringe healers claimed that if two people touched each other's wounds under a full moon, their fates intertwined irrevocably. Historians still argue whether these tales reflect genuine practice or poetic invention. The beast's breath warms her hand. Then let us intertwine our fates with intention, not chance, he says softly. He produces a length of crimson ribbon, silken sourced from distant looms, and ties it gently around her wrist, over her scar. The ribbon's color echoes the arrow's golden flash transmuted by sunset, and his gnarled fingers handle it with surprising delicacy. You probably won't survive this act of ceremony without marveling at the contrast between his strength and tenderness. Rosalind lets out a breath she didn't know she held eyes bright. And I, she replies, offering the dagger hidden until now in return. This blade kept me vigilant. Take it that I may trust instead of fear. She extends the dagger's hilt toward him, and he takes it, twisting it in his large hand before sheathing it carefully at his belt. The steel glints where it catches the morning light, a pledge laid to rest. A mainstream reflection surfaces in medieval betrothal customs. The exchange of tokens, rings, gloves, even locks of hair symbolized mutual commitment. Though blades were uncommon, the gesture mirrors that tradition, relinquishing a weapon as an offering of trust. The ribbon and dagger exchanged, they sit side by side on the stone bench. Neither speaks for a moment. Instead, they allow silence to envelop them like a shared blanket. You trudge to a spot nearby, leaning against the cool wall and observing this rare piece. In the hush, you almost hear every heartbeat, every inhalation, the soft rustle of fabric and fur meeting. At last, Rosalind rests her head against the beast's shoulder. Historians still argue whether love born of magic can endure beyond the first full moon. She murmurs, voice laced with wonder. He inclines his head, pressing his cheek against hers. Let us prove them wrong. You probably won't survive this section without smiling at the unlikely pair, bound by wounds and courage rather than mere decrees. In their shared vulnerability, they forge a bond stronger than any arrow or spell. The morning sun brightens around them, and you trudge away, heart warmed by a union that rose from misfire and fear into something genuine and bold. You trudge into the village scriptorium where sunlight filters through narrow windows onto shelves laden with vellum and ink pots. Quills lie poised beside open ledgers recording births, deaths, and unusually, one very peculiar wedding. The air smells of parchment and beeswax from ceiling sticks. You probably won't survive this session without marveling at the quiet industry of record keepers. A hooded clerk glances up at your approach, ink-stained fingers pausing mid-scratch. "They've requested our chronicles," he murmurs, voice soft as a turning page. "The union must be documented, though some say it defies every custom we know." You trudge closer, noting his ledger's title, Annals of Uncommon Events. Beneath the heading, a half-written entry already details the beastly bridegroom's name in spidery script. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Medieval scribes often recorded extraordinary events, omens, unusual births, or royal scandals in annales appended to official chronicles, providing future generations a glimpse of local lore. These marginal notes sometimes eclipsed more mundane entries like crop yields or tax assessments reflecting community fascinations. The clerk clears his throat and recites aloud as he writes, "On the morn of the 7th moon, in the 13th year of our Lord's reign, was celebrated an alliance most strange between Miss Rosalind Baker and one called the Beastly Suitor." You probably won't survive hearing the official version without imagining the scribe's quill trembling at the word beastly. A fringe tidbit surfaces when the clerk pauses. "My grandmother whispered that in a distant abbey, monks once chronicled a wedding officiated by moonlight, with participants wearing antlers to honor forest spirits." He sketches tiny antlers in the margin. Historians still argue whether such accounts are allegory or eyewitness testimony. The phrase echoes in the hushed room like a bookmark marking uncertainty. As the entry continues, a second clerk wheels in a small chest of relics for ritual preservation, a broken arrowhead, a withered rose, and the soothsayer's pouch of rowan and pebbles. Each will be stored for posterity, like curiosities in a cabinet of wonders. You trudge forward to peer at the arrowhead, gold-tipped and inscribed with a looping heart, its point dulled, but its magic lingering in memory. The senior scribe leans in spectacles perched on his nose. "We'll bind these items in the Liber Miraculorum," he declares. But debate rages in academic circles whether miracle books belong to ecclesiastical or secular collections. You probably won't survive without noting that choice reveals tensions between church authority and community storytelling. A hush falls as a monk enters robe rustling like wind through dry leaves. He crosses himself murmuring miracles belong to God's realm, not to be co-opted by secular scribes. The senior scribe replies, "But the people's tales, whether saintly or arcane, shape history as much as papal bulls." Historians still argue whether lay accounts in miracle books hold equal weight to official decrees. You trudge back to observe the clerks arranging pigments for illuminations, crimson for love, gold for divinity, and eerie silver for the beast's aura. Each color carries symbolic weight, crimson as the arrow's bloodless wound, gold as Cupid's divine spark, and silver as moonlit enchantment. Nearby, a novice scribe practices marginal doodles vines curling into claw-like shapes around the text. You probably won't survive without smiling at his creative flourish. One doodle depicts a tiny beast sipping tea with a baker's daughter under a blossoming tree, more whimsy than documentary, but charming nonetheless. The senior scribe dips his quill and adds a closing note. Let future scholars ponder whether Cupid's misfired arrow wrought true love or simply beguiled two souls into a fanciful alliance. He signs his name with a flourish. The clerk snaps the ledger shut, sealing their record of the extraordinary day. As you trudge out, the scriptorium doors swing closed behind you, leaving the room to its silent vigil. Outside, the village hums with daily routines, carts creaking, children laughing, ovens puffing. Yet beneath it all lies a new undercurrent of legend in the making. You probably won't survive this without one last glance back at the shuttered window. The chronicles, with their blend of fact, fringe, and debate, now stand as guardians of the story for generations to come. Beyond the scriptorium, the world awaits to decide what to make of a baker's daughter and her beastly bridegroom. You trudge back into the crisp afternoon air drawn by distant shouts that echo off timbered walls like startled birds. Ahead, a raucous crowd gathers near the east gate, blocking the sun with their upraised arms and frantic gestures. You probably won't survive this without quickening your stride, heart pounding like a startled drum. Through the throng, you glimpse a small child, no more than 5 summers, struggling against the reins of a runaway cart. Its wheels spin madly across loose stones, threatening to topple both cart and child into the dust. A baker's boy fruitlessly grips at the horse's bridle face, pale as unbaked dough. Panic crackles in the air like static. Suddenly, the beastly suitor bursts through the crowd cloak, flying behind him like a banner in a gale. You trudge closer, breath catching at the sight he vaults onto the cart's side in a single fluid motion that betrays nothing of his hulking frame. His claws, once feared like jagged blades, grip the wooden edge, the boards groaning under his weight. A mainstream historical fact surges into your mind. Medieval carts, typically two-wheeled and drawn by horses or oxen, lacked modern braking systems, making runaway incidents tragically common on steep inclines. Victims often stood little chance without quick intervention from bystanders or mounted knights. Here, the beast arrives in knightly fashion despite his bestial guise. You probably won't survive this without marveling at his agility. He steadies the cart with a guttural grunt, then reaches in, scooping the frightened child into one arm while slamming a massive fist against a wheel axle. The cart shudders to a halt, horse skidding to a trembling stop. A collective exhale ripples through the crowd, the tension draining like water from a tub. The child clings to the beast's furred coat, tears staining chubby cheeks. You trudge forward as the beast kneels, setting the child gently on solid ground. The little one blinks up at him, fingers curling through his soft mane. A fringed tidbit floats through the chaos. Villagers once believed that wild men possessed healing tears, drops that cured fevers when mixed with honey. Historians still argue whether such lore sprang from real practices or were poetic inventions to comfort the frightened someone whispers behind you. Beside you, a merchant clasps his apron, voice trembling. He saved her life. He's no mere monster. Another adds, in 1066, a similar rescue by a Norman knight earned him land and title. Historians still argue whether such deeds truly swayed royal favor or were retroactive justifications in chronicles. The open question hangs like a banner in the breeze. You trudge closer as the beast straightens child cradled securely. He brushes stray tears from her cheeks with his free hand, claw-sheathed fingertips surprisingly gentle. The horse soot black and eyes wide, nuzzles his hand in thanks. You probably won't survive this without feeling your own breath-ease relief blossoming in your chest. The child's mother bursts through the crowd, arms outstretched. "My darling," she cries, gathering her daughter into a trembling embrace. She looks up at the beast, eyes shining with gratitude and awe. "You are a hero," she whispers, voice thick. The beast inclines his head, amber eyes soft as candlelight. "I do what must be done," he rumbles. A stranger in the crowd murmurs. In medieval folk plays, wild men sometimes performed heroic feats to remind villagers that kindness transcends fear. The crowd nods a murmur of agreement, rippling like warm wind. Historians still argue whether these plays influenced real behavior or simply reinforced moral lessons. Another counters. The debate continues, even as all eyes remain on the beast. You trudge to stand beside the baker's daughter Rosalind, whose pale cheeks have flushed with pride. She reaches out, brushing a lock of hair from the beast's brow. "You see," she murmurs, "you are more than the sum of rumors." He glances at her, a softness in his gaze that outshines any sunlight. Nearby, the soothsayer emerges, staff tapping against cobbles. She surveys the scene, lips curving in a rare smile. Compassion revealed in crisis is the purest test of heart, she whispers to the crowd. It cannot be faked. A mainstream fact follows her words. Charitable acts in medieval society, from alms given at church doors to aid in emergencies, were recorded in guild rolls and court files, both to honor benefactors and guide social expectations. A hush settles as the beast carefully returns the child to her mother. You probably won't survive this section without noting how his true nature, strong yet vulnerable, reshapes every fearful tale whispered about him. He bows once more to the crowd, cloak rustling like wind through dry grass, then steps back, merging into the swirl of onlookers. The mother presses a small sack of coins into his massive hand. "Please accept this," she says, though her voice trembles with embarrassment and gratitude. The beast closes his hand over the coins but shakes his head, a silent gesture of refusal. Instead, he raises a finger to his lips, indicating that no payment is necessary. You trudge forward as the mother nods, tears glinting in her eyes. A fringe whisper drifts by. They say wild men never accepted gold for their worth couldn't be measured in coins. Historians still argue whether such claims are embellishments or survival of pre-Christian ideals of generosity, someone adds quietly. As the crowd disperses, relief and admiration mingling like dew on morning grass, you trudge beside Rosalind toward the east gate. Together, you witness the beast stride away, his silhouette tall and unwavering against the setting sun. Each footstep echoes in your mind, a testament that bravery knows no shape and compassion finds its vessel in the most unexpected forms. You probably won't survive this story without allowing hope to bloom in your heart. Cupid's misfired arrow may have bound two unlikely souls, but this heroic rescue binds a village's trust to a beast's gentle courage. And as you head home, lanterns rekindled in windows, you carry with you a new understanding that true love and heroism often arrive side by side, even when the first glance inspires fear. You trudge through the cobbled lanes at dusk, drawn by the soft glow of lanterns and the low hum of intimate conversation drifting through open windows. The village seems transformed. Tales of yesterday's rescue have woven into the very fabric of daily life, sparkling like dew on woven tapestries. You probably won't survive this section without leaning in to catch snippets of the evolving narrative. At the baker's stall, a small group gathers around a plate of warm pastries, voices hushed in conspiratorial delight. "Did you hear how he cradled that child?" One woman whispers, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "My own heart would have shattered under his claws, yet he handled her like porcelain." You trudge closer, inhaling the sweet scent of honeyed dough. A mainstream historical fact flutters into your mind. Medieval bakers often doubled as town news conduits, their ovens still warm with gossip before the first light of dawn. A fringe tidbit skitters through the conversation. They say his heart beats to a human's rhythm, not a beast's anomalous, some claim. Someone adds, historians still argue whether wild men ever adopted fully human hearts or remained hybrids of folklore and flesh. The phrase settles like a delicate crumb on your tongue, reminding you that every story invites debate. You probably won't survive this swirl of whispers without noticing how the bakery's windows display small paper hearts pinned to the glass, anonymous tokens of newfound affection. The baker's daughter Rosalind stands inside, arranging the pastries with a smile that rivals the morning sun. Catching your eye, she steps out, voice soft as yeast rising. Business booms faster than rising dough, thanks to our guest of honor. A blush colors her cheeks. You trudge beside her as she locks the stall, footsteps echoing in the emptying square. "I never imagined a beast could enthrall a village," she confides, voice low. "Yet now I find myself awaiting his next move, like a child waiting for a new rhyme." A mainstream note surfaces. Medieval poetry anthologies frequently included ballads of unlikely love, beast to maiden reflecting society's fascination with transformational romance. In the lantern-lit alley, you pass a group of children reenacting the rescue with makeshift puppets. One puppet, a hay-stuffed barrel draped in fur, dips a ragged hand to save a rag doll. Their audience of younger siblings giggles, enthralled by the retelling. You probably won't survive this charming scene without smiling at how storytelling reshapes truths into playground magic. A fringe murmur drifts from the shadows. They say the beast's true name is lost to time, buried beneath centuries of fear. Someone replies. Historians still argue whether such names held power, or if the forgetting was deliberate to erase traces of old pacts with woodland spirits. The open question ripples through the night's hush. You trudge toward the churchyard where the soothsayer's lantern casts long shadows across ancient tombstones. Nearby, a young couple sits on a bench, heads bent together. She's lucky, the man says, voice tender, to find a heart beneath the fur. The woman nods, eyes shining. My grandmother used to warn us against wild men, yet they reveal our own wildness within. A laugh escapes them soft, intimate. A mainstream fact weaves into your awareness. Medieval courtly love traditions celebrated the tension between fear and desire, often praising the wild unknown as a path to self-discovery. Those texts, penned by troubadours, offered structured rituals for wooing that blended reverence with daring. Further along, you pass the smithy where embers still glow faintly in the forge. The blacksmith leans on his hammer, nodding as he watches a flicker of movement across the square. I'll admit, I was skeptical he rumbles voice as gritty as his ironwork. But if that beast can wield a sword with as much care as he held that child, he earns respect. He glances at a half-forged horseshoe veins of cooling metal, catching lantern light like molten gold. A fringe detail edges in. Some say the smith's anvil once rang true only for human warriors, yet its song changed when the beast first crossed the threshold. A villager snorts. Historians still argue whether anvils could detect nobility, or if that's just allegory for soldiers' morale. The scholarly echo hums beneath the blacksmith's steady gaze. You trudge onward, arriving at the fountain in the square's center. Water trickles over mossy stones, its soft melody blending with laughter and conversation. Carved into the fountain's base are overlapping symbols, a bow entangled with vines, a paw print inside a heart. The village artisan must have added them overnight, nodding to Cupid's misfire and the beast's emergence. You probably won't survive this without kneeling to dip your fingers into the cool water ritual, or impulse you can't say. Reflected in the surface is the lantern-lit visage of Rosalind, now joined by the beast himself. He kneels, removing a pebble from his pouch and tossing it into the fountain with a thoughtful croon. Ripples spread, distorting the lantern's reflections into dancing stars. Rosalind watches, breathing slow. He's adapting to our world, she observes. He learns our customs, partakes in our quirks. Just last night, I caught him trying to master lace-making. You grin at the image of a hulking paw, fumbling delicate threads. Historians still argue whether wild men ever integrated into village life or remained perpetual outsiders. You add voice warm with shared amusement. The beast stands, water droplets gleaming on his fur. He offers his hand to Rosalind, who takes it with a graceful nod. Together, they stroll toward the inn, lanky shadows intertwined. You trudge behind, feeling the village's pulse shift, fear dissolving into warmth, suspicion giving way to curiosity. As they enter the inn, lanterns swing in welcome. The innkeeper, apron dusted with flour, raises a mug in salute. To our bride and groom, he toasts voice hearty. May your union bring us tales sweeter than any mead. Patrons cheer, clinking mugs in raucous approval. You probably won't survive this scene without joining the revelry, smiles and laughter, forging bonds as strong as any oath. Outside, the soothsayer leans on her staff, eyes shining beneath hooded shadows. She murmurs to you, "It's not love that tames the beast, but kindness reflected back." She points at the fountain's carved symbols, symbols carved by hearts that dared to believe. A mainstream reflection surfaces iconography on public art, often memorialized communal values, compassion, unity, transformation, cementing them in shared memory. A fringe echo drifts on the breeze. They carved those marks under moonlight. Historians still argue whether nocturnal artistry channeled latent magic or merely stirred nighttime mischief. The soothsayer chuckles, voice soft. Whether legend or prank, it's proof the village has chosen its own narrative. You trudge away from the square lantern light fading behind you. In every whisper, every carved symbol, and every shared laugh, affection grows gentle, branching outward like new shoots in spring. Cupid's misfired arrow may have sparked the chaos, but it's the soft, persistent warmth of community that fans embers into a hearth. You probably won't survive this final stretch without a deep breath and the faintest smile lingering on your lips. The village, a tapestry of fact, fringe, and debate, now hums with a new story, one of love rediscovered in the most unexpected form. You trudge out of the inn into a soft drizzle of late-night rain, the cobblestones gleaming like polished onyx under lantern light. A hush falls over the street, broken only by the gentle tap of raindrops and the distant hoot of an owl. Tonight, the village gathers beneath a hastily erected pavilion by the ancient oak to hear a revelation that promises to rewrite every whispered theory so far. You probably won't survive this without drawing a deep, anticipatory breath. At the pavilion's center stands the bishop clutching a rolled parchment sealed with crimson wax. He clears his throat voice, echoing against timber beams, "I come bearing the high court's findings." A murmur ripples through the crowd, faces illuminated by torchlight eyes wide with expectant curiosity. A mainstream historical fact glimmers in your mind. Royal courts often commissioned inquiries into unusual events, sending envoys to verify prophecies, contested inheritances, or clandestine treaties. Such reports, once delivered, carried the king's weight and could override local customs. The bishop unfolds the parchment, and the crowd leans in like stalks of wheat under a low breeze. He clears his throat again. Contrary to popular belief, Cupid's arrow was never meant for Miss Rosalind Baker. Gasps bloom across the gathering, sharp as startled birds. It was aimed at the beastly suitor himself as a test of his capacity for love and redemption. You probably won't survive this twist without blinking twice to ensure you heard correctly. A fringe tidbit slips through the bishop's solemn tone. Ancient scrolls from the Temple of Eros suggest that misfires were deliberate arrows coded not in magic alone, but in inks of trial and revelation revealing true intent when they found unexpected flesh. He taps the scroll for emphasis. Historians still argue whether such inks ever existed or were mythic metaphors for life's unexpected turns. The phrase hangs like dew on spider silk, fragile yet luminous. The crowd shifts, murmuring, some skeptical, some thrilled by the drama. You trudge closer to the bishop, noticing the beast's heavy brow furrow in surprise. Rosalind stands at his side, hand clutching his arm as if bracing for a thunderclap. The bishop continues. The arrow's enchantment was crafted to shatter the barrier of fear, to force the suitor to confront his own heart. Only when he offered unwavering compassion would the arrow's true blessing manifest, binding not a maiden's fate, but a beast's redemption. A mainstream fact unfolds in Greco-Roman rites. Initiates sometimes underwent symbolic trials, such as walking through fire or crossing enchanted thresholds to prove worthiness for divine favor. The bishop's account echoes those ancient ceremonies, though here the trial was an internal one. A low chuckle ripples from the soothsayer at the fringe of the crowd. She lifts a gnarled finger. Indeed, it was never meant to spark a mismatched romance, but to unmask a reluctant heart. She gestures to the beast, whose golden eyes flick toward her in recognition. I spoke of trials woven in moonlight, yet the greatest trial lay not in potion or parchment, but in confronting one's own capacity to love. You probably won't survive this revelation without recalling how the beast's heroic rescue and tender confessions mapped his journey toward that moment. The bishop nods, unfurling another slip of parchment. Here is the final proof, a second arrowhead recovered from the oak's roots, inscribed with both our suitor's name and a phrase lost in translation, "True heart unveiled." He holds aloft the arrowhead, a slender shaft crowned with gold that gleams with uncanny light. A fringed scholar in the back whispers to his neighbor, "They say arrows imbued with truth-binding wards could only be crafted by Eros's own hand." His companion nods, voice hushed. Historians still argue whether any temple possessed such divine craft, or if temple inscriptions were elaborate riddles. Their exchange ripples through the assembly, blending academic debate with living drama. Rosalind steps forward, voice clear despite the hush. So it was never I for whom the arrow sought devotion, but him his heart. She places a careful hand on the beast's furred chest, fingers resting where the soothsayer's pouch once lay. And he embraced that test with all his strength and kindness. Her proclamation draws a collective breath from onlookers, a moment of shared realization. A mainstream reflection forms rites of revelation in medieval allegory, often depicted arrows as symbols of divine testing, rather than mere love tokens. In such tales, the hero had to prove inner virtue before winning the arrow's promised boon. Here, the community witnessed a living allegory unfold. The beast inclines his head, amber eyes shimmering with emotion. The arrow's misfire was no accident, he says, voice low yet resonant. It carried two purposes: to test my heart and to guide me to yours, Rosalind. He turns to her offerings of scar and ribbon interwoven in that gaze. I passed that test only because you showed me what love, real love, requires. You probably won't survive this confession without feeling warmth bloom in your chest. The bishop, sensing a climactic moment, gestures for silence. Let the record show that the suitor, tested by divine intent, fulfilled his trial with compassion. Let this union stand as testament to the power of authentic transformation. A murmur of approval rises first, a ripple, then a wave surging through the crowd until applause and cheers break the stillness like a sudden storm. Lanterns bob, torches sway, and the rain taps a lighter rhythm on the pavilion roof, as if joining in celebration. Amid the jubilation, the soothsayer leans close to you. Truth once uncovered binds more firmly than any enchantment, she whispers. Cupid's arrow pointed him inward, yet outward blooms the most unexpected love. Her words echo as the beast kneels before Rosalind, offering the second arrowhead into her open palm. She cradles it reverently, then steps to the oak's gnarled trunk. With gentle fingers, she embeds the arrowhead into bark, softened by decades of moss, symbolically reuniting test and transformation in the tree that witnessed it all. You probably won't survive this symbolic act without noticing how the oak's roots seem to pulse in response, a silent chorus affirming the moment. The bishop pronounces a final blessing, urging the crowd to bear witness to an alliance that transcends fear and embraces truth. Fireworks of torchlight flare as villagers raise lanterns on high. A hush descends once more as the beast and bride turn to face their community, hands entwined. Under the ancient oak, the arrowhead shines a beacon of redemption, proof that love's truest aim was never misplaced. And as you trudge away from the pavilion, the revelation fresh in your mind, you know this village will carry the tale forward of a misfired arrow that by design or destiny unlocked a beast's heart and united two souls in transformative love. You trudge through the gardens, behind the grand hall, where torchlight dances across dew-kissed roses and the soft chorus of crickets serenades the night. A long wooden table draped in embroidered linen stretches beneath the boughs of the ancient oak, laden with platters of roasted fowl, honeyed fruits, and steaming cauldrons of spiced stew. You probably won't survive this feast without loosening your belt. A notch medieval banquets weren't known for modest portions. Candles flicker in ornate iron sconces, casting playful shadows on the guests' smiling faces. The bishop raises a goblet brimming with mulled wine, enameled deep red, and toasts the couple. To Miss Rosalind Baker and the beastly suitor, may your union be as hearty as this meal. Horns of cheers echo through the clearing, punctuated by the clatter of goblets and the occasional "hear, hear." You trudge closer to sample the savory aromas, nearly knocking over a serving of pickled cucumbers that look suspiciously like preserved dragon eggs. Thankfully, they taste more vinegary than explosive. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. In medieval Europe, wedding feasts often lasted several days, with menus carefully planned to reflect status and seasonal availability. Roasted swan for nobility, ale-soaked bread for commoners, and sometimes at particularly lavish affairs, imported spices like cinnamon and saffron. Here, though, the beastly suitor seems equally at ease, stirring the stew as he is guiding Rosalind in a gentle dance under the oak's sprawling branches. You probably won't survive this scene without at least one light joke. So imagine someone whispering, "I'm just here for the free wine and the chance to see a talking beast grapple with gravy." A ripple of laughter follows, and even the beast's rumbling chuckle sounds a bit like a barrel rolling downhill, almost musical in its own right. Nearby, a minstrel plucks a lute, weaving a tender melody that rises and falls like a lullaby. You catch a callback in the lyrics, a tongue-in-cheek nod to crocodile dung sunscreen, reminding everyone how far they've come since the village's more pungent superstitions. That anecdote earned a few wry smiles. Some villagers still wrinkle their noses in mock disgust at the memory. Beside the table, Rosalind laughs as the beast attempts to twirl her in a courtly dance, his massive frame surprisingly graceful. You probably won't survive their duet without marveling at how her silk skirt brushes against his fur, an unlikely embrace of softness meeting strength. A fringe tidbit surfaces among the onlookers in remote hamlets. Some claimed wild men sharpened their claws on saintly relics to gain protection. Historians still argue whether those relics were genuine or merely medieval metalwork marketed as divine armor. A knight still clutching his helmet under one arm offers the beast a roasted pheasant breast. The beast accepts it with a gentle nod, carving a slice with a fork and offering a piece to Rosalind. The sweetness of honeyed glaze contrasts with the gamey flavor, surprising both of them and drawing a playful, "Well, I never thought my wedding dinner would taste this refined" from the beast. You grin, recalling how just days ago he might have offered the baker's daughter a raw sausage link if given half a chance. A mainstream note drifts in medieval forks were rare. Most diners used knives and spoons, and sharing communal plates was common in village feasts. The presence of personal forks here suggests Rosalind or a thoughtful guest procured fine dining tools for the occasion, blending rustic charm with unexpected elegance. You trudge to a nearby bench where the soothsayer sits in quiet contemplation, staff planted beside her like an anchor. She meets your eyes and murmurs. Feasts of celebration have long fed both body and spirit, yet few can digest the complexity of magic woven into mortal affairs. She gestures to the revelers around her, their laughter and chatter rising like incense. Tonight, we savor not just food, but the alchemy of hearts reconciled. You probably won't survive her cryptic remark without a raised eyebrow, so you quip back, "Are you saying this stew has enchantment in its broth?" She smiles, lips curving, only if compassion is the secret spice. At the far end of the table, the local herbalist passes around bowls of spiced mead, infused with mugwort, Rosalind's token of courage in floral form. Each sip offers a warmth that settles in the chest, smacking of sweet herbs and moonlit promise. Fringe lore held that mugwort-laced meads could induce prophetic dreams. Historians still argue whether such brews were medicinal or merely served as an excuse for late-night revelries. You note the gleam in villagers' eyes as they savor the potion, half expecting visions of dancing houndstooth dragons or perhaps impromptu poetry readings. You trudge forward to join Rosalind and the beast as they step away from the main celebration for a moment of quiet togetherness. A gentle mist drifts through the oak's branches. Fairy light's tiny lanterns, strung like constellations, twinkle overhead. He leans close and whispers, "Do you remember the ritual pouch you carried to me?" She nods, fingers brushing the hidden bulge at her waist. "I carry it still warmed by every thought of you." A mainstream reflection surfaces tokens carried close to the heart lockets. Herbs, letters were common medieval love charms believed to sustain affection across distances and duties. You probably won't survive this tender exchange without a soft breath, but the trumpeter's sudden flourish draw you back to the feast. A horn fanfare announces a final toast. The bishop raises his goblet once more. To love tested to hearts unveiled, and to the promise of enchanted tomorrows, the crowd echoes to love tested and hearts unveiled in boisterous chorus. Someone shouts, "May our bellies be as full as our hearts," prompting a playful cheer and the clinking of mugs. You chuckle, recalling how not long ago the town feared the beast would frighten even the village cat. Now they entrust him to carve their roast and pour their drinks. As the final notes of the lute drift into silence, Rosalind raises her hand to the beast. "Shall we seal this union in dance once more?" she asks, voice bright. He clasps her hand gently, leading her into a soft waltz beneath the oak's watchful gaze. Their steps echo in the night, a rhythm of unity, trust, and shared destiny. You trudge back toward the pavilion's edge, settling on a mossy stone to watch. The lantern's glow softens embers of celebration, flickering like reluctant fireflies, surrendering to sleep. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of roses and sage. In that breath, you sense the village itself exhales a community bound by newfound hope and the extraordinary love story unfolding at its heart. You probably won't survive this section without savoring the moment. So lean back, rest your weight against the oak's sturdy trunk, and let the gentle aftermath of feast and laughter cradle your senses. The banquet of body and soul continues long into the night, a lasting testament to Cupid's misfired arrow that found its true mark in a beast's redeemed heart. You trudge into the gray, pre-dawn light, damp mist clinging to every surface like a whispering veil. The village square, once brimming with feasting tables and lantern-lit laughter, now lies strewn with overturned chairs, scattered petals, and half-empty goblets rolling in puddles. A strange hush lingers, broken only by the distant tolling of the church bell, which clangs unevenly as if still trying to find its rhythm. You probably won't survive this scene without steadying yourself against a half-wilted banner heart, thudding like war drums in a lullaby. Above you, the ancient oak's boughs sway in a sudden gust, shedding droplets of dew that patter like soft applause. Somewhere a lantern guttered out its flame, extinguishing with a last cough of smoke. Shadows pool in abandoned corners, and the leather-bound trial parchments lie crumpled beneath a puddle ink, bleeding into the cobblestones. You trudge forward, boots squelching toes, brushing shards of broken pottery, remnants of celebratory toasts spilled in revelry turned restless. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Medieval processions and ceremonies were often followed by spontaneous rough music, lively demonstrations featuring pots, pans, and loud instruments to ward off evil spirits or celebrate community spirit. What you're witnessing feels like an unruly echo of that tradition, a ritual undone and reshaped by human exuberance. Up ahead, a cluster of scholars huddles beneath a street lamp, robes drenched in quills at the ready. They pore over soggy scrolls, muttering in tones that blend excitement with exasperation. One adjusts his soaking hood and exclaims. The sequence faltered at a Invocation 3. Our Latin chant slipped into ancient Gallic mid-sentence. Another counters historians still argue whether that dialect ever existed outside bardic invention. Their debate ripples through the damp air, a scholarly current swirling amid chaos. You trudge between them, waterlogged parchment in hand. A fringe tidbit surfaces. A novice mentions that in some fringe manuscripts, scholars believed a mispronounced chant could summon mischievous will-o-wisps that dance until dawn, sowing confusion. You tilt the scroll's edge to catch a faded notation, an asterisk beside a scribbled warning, "Beware verse 5." Nearby, a group of villagers purses their lips as they reenact the midnight ritual in miniature. One waves a willow branch like a conductor's baton. Another tosses flower petals into the air, exclaiming, "Now call the spirits of the oak." The petals scatter, then swirl into a tiny tornado of pink and white, spinning faster until it dissolves into the mist. The participants laugh breathlessly, then pause, exchanging wide-eyed glances. Did they just glimpse a dancing spirit? You probably won't survive this moment without recalling the soothsayer's caution. True magic thrives on balance, and unchecked mirth can tip the scales. Against the eastern wall, the soothsayer stands cloak-soaked but unwavering. She steadies herself on her staff and clears her throat. Chaos is creation's midwife, she intones, voice ringing like a distant bell. Yet without restraint, even sacred rites devolve. She gestures to the scholars. Speak again, the corrected chant, or risk, leaving the rite forever open. The scholars gulp, nodding, and begin to rehearse Latin phrases under their breath, mangled at first, then sharpening into coherent lines that float above the square. You trudge closer, listening as their voices rise in harmony. The corrected invocation, spirits of root and bark and leaf, untangle bond of magic's grief. Each phrase echoes against sagging banners and shuttered windows. As they chant, the scattered petals on the ground stir, drifting into the forming circle, drawn in chalk around the oak. You probably won't survive the palpable shift in atmosphere without sensing the air grow electric, charged by every syllable. A knight, damp from head to toe, steps forward to join the scholars, his sword hilt still strapped to his waist. He clears his throat, voice firm. In 14th century chivalric orders, knights were sometimes called upon to guard sacred rites, ensuring proper conduct and protecting against wolves, or worse, human mischief makers. He bows to the soothsayer, then stands sentinel at the circle's edge, eyes scanning for rogue pranksters or stray livestock. You trudge around the circle, following the path of the ritual. At each of the 4 chalked points, a lone candle flickers to life, rose-scented wax igniting as if by unseen hands. The flame's hue shifts between silver and gold, echoing the arrow's original enchantment. The soothsayer nods, satisfied, and steps into the circle's center, raising her hands. By oak's old heart and moon's pale eye, restore the balance, let magic lie, she chants. The candles flare, then dim to steady glows. The scholars fall silent, breaths held. A hush envelops you all, a moment suspended between chaos and calm. suddenly a ripple of wind sweeps through the square, scattering the wet petals into a gentle spiral that climbs the oak's trunk and vanishes into its leaves. The trial parchments lift from the puddle, floating upward before dissolving like mist in sunlight. You probably won't survive this without blinking, unsure if it's magic or a trick of your mind. At the oak's base, the second arrowhead, embedded days ago by Rosalind, glows faintly. The bark around it pulses with soft light, as if acknowledging the rite's completion. Nearby, the ritual pouch of rowan and pebbles warms in your coat pocket, a steady reminder that balance has been restored. You trudge back toward the soothsayer, who gathers her staff and scrolls the circle closed. The ritual stands mended, she announces, voice low but firm. Magic rebalanced by human intent, what was fractured now healed. She bows to the assembled villagers and scholars alike, her presence a bridge between worlds of fact and fringe. A mainstream reflection drifts to your mind. Medieval ritual magic often hinged on precise recitation and timing. Astronomical alignments, lunar phases, and exact phrasing determine success or failure. Tonight, the misstep and subsequent correction echo, that delicate precision reminding you how close enchantment teeters between miracle and mishap. As the candle flames waver out one by one, the square brightens in the growing dawn light. Shadows recede, revealing bright-eyed children creeping forward to inspect the chalk circle's fading lines. They giggle as they step into the cool dew chalk smudging on shoes as they dart through the scene, reclaiming the space for playful exploration. You probably won't survive this without letting your own laughter surface, warmed by the return of calm. The villagers step forward, greeting one another with relieved smiles. The scholars gather their parchments wet but intact and share whispered congratulations. Even the knight lowers his visor to grin, revealing a face softer than armor allows. Above you, the oak's leaves rustle in approval. The soothsayer sheathes her staff and offers you a wry smile. Chaos and order must dance together, she says, voice threaded with gentle sarcasm. Tonight you witnessed both the pitfalls of frivolity and the power of correction. You trudge away from the square boots, picking up stray petals as souvenirs of a night where scholarly debate, fringe magic, and heartfelt intention entwined in glorious disarray. The first birds of dawn herald the sun's arrival, their songs weaving new melodies into the village's living legend. And as you follow the cobblestone path back home, the lessons of the night settle in your mind, that magic demands respect, that human error can foster unexpected wonder, and that even chaos, when guided by sincere hearts, can forge bonds stronger than any arrow or decree. You trudge to the edge of the brook, where the first golden arrow, now straightened from its misfire, lies embedded in a mossy bank, its shaft mottled with age and weather. Dawn's light sketches the arrow's fletching in gentle hues, reminding you of the enchantment it once carried. You probably won't survive this moment without kneeling to examine its worn inscription, a labyrinth of tiny runes that glimmer faintly when kissed by sunlight. Beside the arrow stands the beastly suitor cloak, drawn around his shoulders against the morning chill. His amber eyes track the brook's current as though seeking some echo of the arrow's original flight. Rosalind arrives quietly, her footsteps soft on the dewy grass, mugwort tucked beneath her bodice, and second arrowhead gleaming at her belt. You trudge close enough to hear their murmured words. "I've thought of every way to restore what was broken," the beast admits, voice low. "But only courage can rewrite a misaligned fate." He lifts his hand palm open, and Rosalind places the warmed pebble from the ritual pouch into it. Its surface is cool proof. The enchantment remains tamed, but restless. A mainstream historical fact flits to mind in medieval lore. Reconciliation rites often required symbolic gestures at the site of the original breach, crossing swords where conflict began, or washing wounds where injury first struck. The beast bends to retrieve the arrow, twisting it free with surprising delicacy. The runes shimmer on his fur-brushed fingers, and you probably won't survive this sight without noting how his expression shifts uncertainty mingled with resolute calm. Rosalind steps forward, voice steady. "Let us offer an act of redemption, not just blood or blade, but a pledge of renewed purpose." She unwraps a length of crimson ribbon, the same one that bound their scars, and wraps it tightly around the arrow's shaft. As the ribbon coils, the runes flare with golden light, as though awakening from slumber. Fringe lore holds that binding a misfired enchanted object with a token of true intent can reorient its power. Historians still argue whether such practices existed beyond whispered rituals or served as narrative devices in troubadour tales. Together, they stand at the brook's edge. The beast lifts the arrow aloft tip aimed skyward. By blade of trust and bond of hearts, may this flight bear purpose true, he intones, echoing the cadence of their shared trials. Rosalind's voice joins soft yet unwavering. May arrow's path reflect our vow to honor love's test and shape our fate. You probably won't survive this invocation without feeling a tremor in the morning air, an electric charge that quickens every breath. The beast draws back his arm and releases the arrow. It arcs overhead in a luminous trajectory, tracing a perfect bow against the pale sky. As it flies, the ribbon unwinds, catching the breeze and trailing behind like a comet's tail. Below, you watch in silent awe as the arrow descends guided by unseen hands and strikes a small wooden target fastened to the oak's trunk, the very spot where they first sealed their union. The arrowhead embeds squarely at its heart, sending a ripple of light across the bark. A gentle hum resonates through the oak's limbs, as if the tree itself sighs in relief. A mainstream reflection surfaces medieval archery ceremonies, sometimes included test shots to prove skill, and seal agreements, shooting arrows through hoops or into carved targets symbolized precision and honor. Here, the test transcends skill, embodying a pledge renewed by love and bravery. The beast lowers his arm, amber eyes glinting with a new light. It aligns. He whispers, voice thick. The enchantment is here in this union, this act. Rosalind steps forward, pressing her palm over the ribbon's knot. The light dims to a steady glow, a quiet affirmation that the misfired magic now serves its true purpose. You trudge closer, boots brushing moist grass, and place your hand against the oak's trunk where the arrow rests. A warmth seeps through the wood, traveling up your arm like the thrill of first love. Around you, the village stirs. Birds take flight. Lanterns flicker their last sparks, and distant church bells toll a gentle blessing. A soothsayer's voice drifts from the shadows. Redemption is born, not from correcting mistakes, but from embracing them with courage. You probably won't survive this without carrying her words riveted in your mind as the brook murmurs its approval. Rosalind turns to the beast's eyes, shimmering with unshed tears. Your heart's true arrow has found its mark, she says softly. He inclines his head, stepping forward to enfold her in a hug that transcends shape and form. Their embrace, tender and fierce, weaves together every trial arrow, ritual consent, and courage into a tapestry of enduring love. Above, the oak's leaves rustle in approving applause. The target board glows faintly, the arrow's magic humming like a lullaby. You trudge back, feeling the shift in the air, a certainty that fate has realigned not by power alone, but by the bravery to attempt redemption. As you step away from the oak, the village's heart beats in steady rhythm again, each echo a testament to love's transformative power. You probably won't survive this story without carrying home the lesson that even misfires can lead to true aim when guided by intent, trust, and the courage to act. You trudge along the dew-slick path leading from the oak back toward the sleeping village, the first pale rays of dawn stretching gold across shuttered windows. Lanterns, long since doused, leave inky shadows that recede before the light's soft advance. A gentle hush blankets the streets, punctuated only by the distant crow of a rooster and the brook's steady murmur edging the village. You probably won't survive this without pausing to breathe in the crisp morning air, tasting promise on your tongue. As you reach the square, you see villagers emerging like flowers at sunrise, rubbing sleep from their eyes, stretching limbs, and exchanging nods of quiet relief. The carts are rolled out once more, bread is fetched from ovens, and the marketplace stirs back to life. Yet beneath this return to routine lies a shift as subtle as a petal's fall. Trust takes root where fear once grew. A mainstream historical fact surfaces: medieval villages often began daily commerce with a communal blessing at dawn, priests or elders invoking protection over traders and animals alike. Today's blessing, though unspoken, emerges in the villagers' welcoming smiles toward the beastly suitor as he steps into the light. You trudge closer to the fountain, its waters now crystal clear in morning's glow. The sculpted symbols of bow and paw still intertwine at its base, a public emblem of transformation. Rosalind stands beside the beast, offering him a flask of fresh spring water. He cups it in both hands, one softened by ritual, the other still bearing fur's wild strength, and drinks deeply. Water flows over his fur, drips into the basin, and ripples across carved stone. You probably won't survive this sight without sensing its quiet symbolism renewal through life's simplest element. A fringe tidbit drifts through your mind. Some folk belief held that beasts who drank from consecrated fountains at dawn reclaimed fragments of lost humanity. Historians still argue whether such tales originated in pastoral lore or in clergy's attempts to reclaim wild men for civilization. Watching him sip, you imagine shards of legend merging with lived reality. Nearby, children gather around the fountain's edge, tossing pebbles in to test whether each plunk echoes differently in the morning quiet. Their laughter rings clear free of the tension that colored the previous night. A smith's apprentice, boots muddy from early chores, shapes a small horseshoe charm, offering one to the beast, who accepts it with a gracious nod. You note that even these tokens carry weight, a horseshoe worn against misfortune, and now offered in friendship. You trudge over to the baker's stall where Rosalind arranges fresh loaves. She catches your eye and lifts a warm roll toward you. "Break fast with us," she invites, voice bright. You probably won't survive the aroma of honeyed oats without nodding in thanks. The beast stands patiently, cloak drawn back over broad shoulders, watching the humble feast with gentle eyes. He reaches to take a roll, then pauses, offering it instead to an elderly widow tucked at the stall's edge. Her eyes fill with gratitude as she accepts. Around you, merchants murmur admiration. He shares our bread as kin, not as a stranger. A mainstream reflection emerges. Sharing bread was among the most sacred gestures of hospitality in medieval society. Granting food to a stranger signified acceptance into the community's fellowship. Today, that ritual is lived anew in every shared loaf. You trudge through the square to the church steps, where the bishop stands, hands folded in quiet blessing. He smiles at the beast, and Rosalind then gazes skyward. May this day be recorded not only in parchment, but in every life it touched. He nods approvingly, and villagers bow their heads in silent accord. Above, the sun climbs higher, gilding rooftops and igniting stained glass windows in kaleidoscopes of color across whitewashed walls. Birds flit from eaves to chimneys, their song and flight a living benediction. You probably won't survive this without lifting your gaze, absorbing the symphony of light and life. A fringe whisper reaches you. An old herbalist comments that when sun and water unite after ritual, enchanted vestiges fade into gentle blessings rather than stubborn curses. Historians still argue whether such folk insights hold any residue of true magic or speak to deeper human psychology. Regardless, the warmth on your skin affirms something akin to grace. At the market's edge, the blacksmith hammers a horseshoe into shape, a commemorative piece stamped with entwined initials of the couple. He winks at the beast, and Rosalind made for luck on the road ahead. The beast nods, hefting the shoe as though it were forged of gold. Each spark from the anvil seems to carry hope, trailing embers of promise into the village's waking day. You trudge toward the path that leads from the square to the gate where the soothsayer now stands among the ancient stones, staff at her side. She meets your eyes, a silent acknowledgement passing between you. Then, with a slight nod and a flick of her cloak, she vanishes into the dew-dappled morning, her part in the story complete, leaving you to witness what follows. You probably won't survive this moment without reflecting on how peace, once tested, often settles more firmly than before. The village breathes in unison, a community reborn by trial and redemption. The beastly suitor walks beside Rosalind, shoulders squared, yet relaxed, cloak and veil, drifting like banners heralding a new era. And as you trudge onward, boots scuffing soft earth heart light, you carry with you the scene of dawn's peaceful resolution, where fear gave way to trust, where legend became life, and where a misfired arrow found its true aim in the steadfast courage of two unlikely hearts. You trudge through the lavender-scented aisle between rows of flowering hedges toward the lily-draped arbor where the final vows await each petal, a silent witness to journeys both ordinary and enchanted. Dawn's gentle rays filter through pale blooms, casting a soft rosy glow over the assembled villagers, their faces bright with anticipation and quiet joy. You probably won't survive this scene without pausing to feel your chest soften as though a breath you didn't know you held finally exhales. The beastly suitor stands beneath the arbor cloak, swept back to reveal the full sweep of his fur and the gentle curve of his horns, now polished smooth by shared trials. To his side, Rosalind Baker shimmers in a gown woven from morning mist and hope ribboned of crimson at her waist, echoing the arrow's true path. Their eyes meet, binding a silent promise far deeper than any spoken word. A mainstream historical fact flutters across your mind. Medieval wedding processions often culminated at church altars or sacred groves, with guests bearing tokens of goodwill, ribbons, coins, and flowers cast at the couple's feet to ward off evil and bless the union. Here the villagers release petals of white lily and lavender, strewing the path in a fragrant blessing. You trudge closer, breath-catching, as the soothsayer, her robes mellowed to twilight hues, steps forward to officiate. Her gnarled staff, topped with a carved owl, leans against the arbor's post. By root and wing, by thorn and bloom, may your union outlast winter's gloom, she intones, voice warm as embers in a dying hearth. A fringe tidbit drifts on the hymn of her words. In fringe lore, weddings under blooming lavender ensure dreams of shared futures, though historians still argue whether such customs were ever widespread or local novelties. At her side, a scholar in damp robes tweaks his spectacles and murmurs. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers indeed cherished lavender for protection or simply loved its scent. Those three words hang like delicate embroidery across the vows to come a nod to open questions even in the most sacred rites. Rosalind steps forward, voice steady, yet tender. Beast of trials, my heart found home in your kindness. I choose you not by decree, but by devotion. Her words float on the floral breeze, each syllable a soft chord. You probably won't survive this confession without feeling your own heart swell in resonance. The beast inclines his head, amber eyes shadowed with gratitude. Miss Baker, you taught me that true strength lies not in claws, but in compassion, he replies, voice a gentle rumble. By these trials, I vow to protect your laughter, share your burdens, and guard your dreams as fiercely as my own. His pledge spoken into the morning hush feels like a warm cloak wrapped around every listener. A mainstream note weaves through the arbor. Medieval vows often included promises of mutual support, feeding, clothing, and honoring one another until death's release. Yet here, compassion and courage echo louder than any legalese, elevating their promises beyond mere survival. You trudge to the circle of witnesses, farmers, smiths, scholars, and children, each offering a symbolic gift, a sheaf of wheat for abundance, a horseshoe for luck, a quill for shared stories, a ribbon for lasting bonds. Each token is placed in a woven basket at the arbor's foot, a tapestry of community blessing. As the soothsayer lifts her staff, she intones, by earth below and sky above, I pronounce you bound in compassion and love. A hush falls, then the arbor's air ripples with an invisible current, like a silent chord striking in every heart. A gentle breeze stirs the hedges, carrying a soft chorus of whispered, so be its will from the guests. At last, the beast and bride clasp hands, one furred, one gloved in a tender seal. Their hands unite with perfect fit, as though two halves rediscovered each other. Their first shared breath under the arbor is a vow unto itself, a promise carried on lavender-scented wind. You probably won't survive witnessing their first kiss without closing your eyes to savor its weight, a gentle press, a ripple of warmth, a quiet benediction that binds not only two souls, but an entire village in hope renewed. The petals fall around them like snow in spring, soft and unexpected. And as they turn to face their community, Rosalind's hand resting lightly on the beast's arm, his other hand raised in gentle salute, the arbor seems to sigh in release. In that moment, the village inhales as one fear transformed into trust myth, woven into reality. and love affirmed by every heart present. Now dim the pace of your heartbeat as you slide gently from the arbor's glow into the hush of the morning haze. Feel the soft press of dew beneath your boots, each droplet a tiny lullaby, whispering calm. The breeze, once charged with promise, now soothes like a lover's hand across your brow. Inhale the scent of lavender and lilies drifting on the air, subtle, sweet, and steady, and let it float through every part of you. The villagers drift away in pairs and trios, their voices soft echoes in the labyrinth of hedged walkways. Laughter still ripples occasionally faint as distant chimes, but it settles like petals on still water, no ripple too large, no note too sharp. Even the birds quiet their songs, content to perch in treetops and witness the aftermath of wonder. Your path leads home, cobblestones warmed by dawn-shuttered windows, brightening as hearth fires stoke new beginnings. Each step feels lighter than the last, buoyed by certainty that love, once tested, finds a steadfast course. The wind hums in gentle cadence, a muted melody guiding your thoughts toward serenity. Remember the soothsayer's words, chaos and order dance together, but kindness leads the final step. Recall the scholar's debates, open questions threading through facts and folklore, yet notice how every question found its answer in compassion. Now let your eyelids sink with the ease of petals falling from bloom to earth. Breathe deeply of this soft world where lavender fields ripple in memory and oak roots cradle the arrow's gleam. Drift in the hush of satisfied hearts where every whisper affirms even misfires can guide souls to home. Sleep now cradled by the gentle cadence of dawn unraveling into day, and carry this tale into dreams where love's true arrow always finds its mark.